So dad, he had a trust. And basically, mother didn't like the terms of it.
In many other families, when money is involved, people start cutting each other's throats.
If the court orders me to give this money back, I will do so. You mean, again, this attorney went from $150,000 townhome prior to knowing mom to $1.5 million mansion. Showing an unsigned means the dad never signed the trust, and that trust, the 2013 trust, made mom sole trustee. So without dad's signature, what does mom have? She has nothing. And in the last 10 years, including a couple years of the worst market ever, she not just doubled, not tripled, not quadrupled, not quintupled. She's 6 times.
Yeah, that's in her 70s.
In her 70s with no training. On the right is my father's alleged signature on the trust, again, dated the same day, August 5th, 2013.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I am here with John Smith. That's his real name. And we're going to be talking about family fraud, also the name of John Smith's book. It's an interesting story. I've spoken with him for hours about the story. We first started talking a few weeks ago, and essentially it's the dispute, or is in John's, the way John puts it, basically it's the theft of a $30 million inheritance, and the IRS's unwillingness to look into it, or the authorities' unwillingness to look into it. And it's an interesting story. And so we're going to get into it. So check it out. You live in Orlando. You came over here from Orlando, and we talked a few weeks ago. You approached me a few weeks ago, and you've got there was a video online where you break it all down. And so I watched a portion of that video, then we ended up talking on the phone, and then that's how we ended up getting here. And so the crux of the story, real quick, just to let people know like what they're getting into, is that your father had an estate worth roughly, according to your mother, roughly $30 million.
Correct.
She told you that it was worth $30 million.
Yes.
Then your father's will suddenly changed.
His trust.
His trust changed a few weeks before his death. 16
days before he died.
Right. So it changed unexpectedly. And your mother suddenly valued the estate to the IRS $8 million. And then essentially made a bunch of changes to the trust, and has since, I know this is a very choppy version of the story. And basically there's been a dispute between you and your mom. Initially it was you, your mom, and your whole family.
My entire family.
The entire family. And then essentially your mom saying, look, this whole estate's $8 million and it's all mine. And she's somehow managed to spend what, 14, 15 million?
It's a miracle.
Right. And she still has 10 or 11 million dollars.
It's another miracle.
Right. So has a ton of money left. So obviously the estate was never worth the $8 million she told the IRS. It was always worth at least roughly the $30 million that she had always said it was worth. And then, but there have been these really, I hate to say comical, it's almost like it could be like a movie, like a comical movie. Like it could be a satiric kind of a movie.
It would make a great documentary.
I was going to say like an Adam Sandler movie, but where basically it's outrageous. The kinds of, it's horrible from your perspective. I understand, and I'm sorry to make light of it.
It is kind of funny,
but it's outrageous the amount of kind of corruption that appears to be in all of these transactions that go back and forth. And the problem is that you're trying to get relief through the courts, which are not really set up to help anybody, especially at the expense or to go against a member of the court, like the other lawyer. So if a lawyer says,
if a lawyer lies,
if a lawyer lies about something,
a lawyer lies, right?
So if a lawyer lies about something and says, this is the way it is, Your Honor, the judge typically says, okay, well, this is a member of the court, so we're going to go with his opinion, regardless of the fact that you're going, yeah, but Your Honor, I have this proof and this proof and this proof. Yeah, I know, but this lawyer just said that's not true, and to disregard that. And so the courts have essentially are disregarding all of the proof, and you're not getting any, you haven't gotten any help from the courts. You're not getting any help from law enforcement. You're not getting any help from the IRS, even though the evidence appears to be overwhelming in your defense. So with that said, that's essentially what we're going to get into.
Right.
But what I would like to do is kind of start at the beginning, which is, where were you born?
I was born in Iowa, of all places, Bettendorf, Iowa.
Right.
And when I was an infant, my parents were high school sweethearts, etc. So it wasn't like my father divorced my original mother and married a trophy wife, and that trophy wife stole his $30 million. First marriage for both, first and only. They were married 47 years. So I grew up outside Chicago.
Okay.
And I was just a normal kid, although I couldn't fit in high school. The high school I went to is called Bennett Academy. It's in Lisle. Do you know Chicago at all?
No.
So it's in a western suburb. It's a Jesuit high school. You had to wear a uniform. It was the kind of high school you have to take an entrance exam to get into.
Right.
And I got almost 100. So my parents were like, oh, smart kid. He won't have any trouble. But then I didn't understand the dynamic of being a student. And the dynamic of being a student is it's not cool to ask questions. It's not cool to try and learn, right? I was totally, and then, my mother was dressing me. And so like one day I wore this red and white checkerboard shirt, and all the kids were like, hey, Farmer John. And, so it's a tough time being 14, 15. You just want kids to like you. And I didn't fit in. So what happened, and I learned later through counseling, I was trying to get attention, and I couldn't get any positive attention.
Right.
So I sought negative attention. And what can a good, smart kid do? He can fail.
Right.
You get a lot of negative attention. So I started flunking all my classes. My parents couldn't figure it out. So my sophomore year, I was in danger of having to repeat my entire year. So they sent me to a school for underachievers in Connecticut. And there they teach very slowly.
Right.
But I was able to get A's and B's.
And not trying at all.
Not trying at all, but they made you study, and they teach you so slowly. But I didn't want to go back. The kids there smoked. And then, 6 months later, I started smoking.
Right.
Kids drank. Kids would talk about doing acid. I didn't know what that was. They're going to pour acid on their hands,
Right.
Wouldn't that hurt? So that summer in the Chicago Tribune, there was a Chicago Magazine article about this really cool military high school where you live there outside Milwaukee. And so my parents took me up for a FAM trip, familiarization trip.
Right.
And that's where I decided to finish my high school.
In military school.
At military school. Look, my high school, St. John's Military Academy, is in Delafield, Wisconsin. The campus is cool. Maybe you can flash up some stills of the campus. It looks like a Gothic castle. Maybe Gothic's the wrong word, but all the buildings are, it's like a fortress.
Right. And
it's a really cool campus. From a distance, the military looks really cool. When you're there, it was kids your own age, and this was the lesson, is that kids your own age had power over you. And you could either rebel, but that didn't last long. You'd have to eat square corners, plates here, left, it's hard to do with this mic, but, up, this, you'd walk square corners. And it's part of the way as a kid, they make you more or less worthless, and then they build you up. And so, after the first 4 months, it's yes, sir, no, sir, even to your parents. And so and again, they teach you to study. They make you study, and there's punishment if you don't study. So it's easy to get good grades. But that weaned me. I learned that I like making decisions. And so I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to go into the military. And so I went, that summer, I went to the University of Iowa. Now, why Iowa? It's a pretty campus.
Right.
And the University of Iowa at the time, here's a little useless trivia for you. I like to read. I think we both like to read.
Right.
And have you ever read the book First Blood? The Rambo.
That Rambo movie?
Rambo, right.
No, I've never read the book, but I saw the movie.
All right. So the book is written by a guy named David Morrell, Morrell. And he lived in Iowa City.
Okay.
And so First Blood was his Rambo book, Rambo series. But then he also wrote Brotherhood of the Rose, Fraternity of the Stone. Both were made into miniseries in the 1980s. I read Fraternity of the Stone. And at the end of it, it says, David Morrell lives in Iowa City. So I was like, I wonder if he's in the directory. He was.
Right.
Picked up phone, called him. He talked to me.
Right.
It was the coolest thing. So, I mean, but at the University of Iowa, phone calls to David Morrell aside, they had a shortage of dorm rooms. So they piled, for the fall semester, they piled like 20 kids on every the residence halls. It was a high rise in Iowa City. So it was like 20 floors or 10 floors, whatever. And on every floor, there was a lounge. So they piled like 10 bunk beds in the lounge. And then that's where I spent my freshman year. And the problem was, one light switch, 20 kids. So freshmen come in drunk at 2 a.m, flip on the light switch. It was impossible to get any sleep, and I started missing classes. So it became go to class, get a D, or don't go to class, get a D.
Right.
So I started not going to class. I flunked out.
Right.
So flash forward to December. Growing up, my father had a little bit of the crazy in him. You didn't want to get him mad.
Right.
His whole face would get mad. I mean, his whole face would get red. And he just, I remember my mother growing up said, if your father ever strikes you, you let him win. And I was like, no problem. He's going to win anyways. He's bigger than me. So I just remember being 18, like cringing. What am I going to tell Dad? What logical reason could I tell him that I flunked out of the University of Iowa, a school he paid for?
Right.
And so I came home and, ironically, he had received word that his company was transferring him to the Philippines. So he wasn't that pissed. He was like, okay, well, you got two choices. You can either go out on your own or join the military. And I was like, well, I just spent 2 years at a military high school. Don't want to do that. If I go out on my own, where should I move to? And he goes, how about Orlando? And to be 18, and he said, get a job at Disney World. So to be 18 on your own, Disney World, I mean, it was checking a lot of boxes.
Right.
So that's what I did.
Okay.
I moved down, and my whole life, I've always been an incredibly hard worker. My parents encouraged that when I was a kid, and I've had, people I look up to this day, they have a great work ethic. And so I got one job at Disney World as a busboy. And then I got another job at a hotel nearby as a busboy. And I would work 80 hours a week, sometimes 90. Didn't have a car, didn't have a girlfriend. I worked. And here's the crazy thing. And I can't believe I did this, but I did it. I never got hit. So I lived in this apartment complex that's not there anymore. It's called Lake Vista Village. It was on one side of Lake Buena Vista. So everyone that lives in Orlando, Lake Vista Village right across from Disney Village.
Yeah.
Well, I could either get to Disney Village by riding my bicycle down Apopka Island Road and be exposed to traffic that's going to kill me at 50 miles an hour.
Right.
Or I could jaywalk across I-4, and that's what I did.
Right.
In the daytime and then at night. So imagine running across the eastbound lanes, standing in the median.
There's what, 4 lanes going both ways?
3 lanes going one way, 3 lanes
6
going
total
at 70 miles an hour.
You'll be fine.
Yeah. So I never got hit.
Right.
The craziest thing was it. No shit.
I think we would know. You'd be somebody. I'd be talking to somebody else right now.
Yeah. So
at 70 miles an hour.
but I rationalized that. I was like, 20 minutes at 50 miles an hour, I'm still dead. 20 seconds at 70 miles an hour, I'll take the 20 seconds, less risk. So I worked at Disney a couple years, and then in the early 90s, I started a house cleaning business, and I was the business.
Yeah.
So I in my whole life, I've never been arrested. I've always worked, but on paper, I'm a college dropout.
Right. For
the last 20 years, I've had a business. You can Google it. We were on Shark Tank. It's called Storm Stoppers. So
would you let me talk about the Shark Tank thing real quick? Sorry. So you were running a house cleaning business. Did you have any employees?
No employees. And one day I got tired of selling a service, because then when you sell a service, you got to go and perform it. Right. And I was the service. But it taught me to live frugally on nothing.
Right. But at that point, when did you jump to, Storm
Stoppers? So there was a business in the intervening time. One day in the house cleaning days, I looked over at a car next to me in traffic, and it was probably a Gator Seminole, Florida Gator Seminole. Yeah. And it had these car flags on the windows, and it had the antenna topper and magnets, like rah-rah, it's football season. But I noticed the wheels were blank. And so I was like, if you take, a piece of plastic and you put a college logo on it, and then you find a way to attach the plastic to the wheel, you'd have a business. So I set about inventing. I didn't have a background, but I just had this, I'm tired of selling a service. I want to sell a product, because the vision is you sell a product, you deliver the product, you're done.
Yeah.
And so I invented a product called Clever Covers. So it was made of plastic, and it was used a fastener known as Dual Lock. It's made by 3M. And I had, to prove that it would stay on a wheel on a highway speeds, I took a set out to Disney's racetrack. At the time, they had the Richard Petty driving experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're a NASCAR fan.
No, my dad did it. My dad went.
Did he drive?
Yeah, he got to drive they let you with an instructor or something. They actually
did you go out there with him?
No, I didn't. But, it was for a birthday present given to him by my sister.
That it's a really cool. And my rationale was, and
if it can stay on those. If it can stay on the driving on the track
at 140 miles an hour, right, it'll stay on an 80. And I just lucked out. It was kind of a ballsy request, because I was like, you guys got to warm up the cars anyway. So could I put a set on and you warm up the cars? And the day I went out there, the owner of the Richard Petty driving experience, whose name escapes me, happened to be there and maybe liked me and liked my chutzpah,
right,
and said, okay. The only thing he said was no pictures, right, because at the time they had a Dale Earnhardt number 3 race car, and they didn't want.
They were promoting it, right?
Right. And thankfully, I didn't take any more pictures after he said no pictures. I had taken some pictures beforehand to prove I was there.
Right.
But when he said no pictures,
you stopped.
From that point on, it was clear, no pictures afterwards, and I wasn't going to argue.
Right.
Yeah. So they stayed on, did about 8-10 laps, and I got the pictures to prove it. So for the next 8 years, I sold those wheel covers.
How did that end up Shark Tank?
Well, so in the fall of 2004,
just after you did the Richard Petty thing, or when you were just thinking about
the Richard Petty thing was like in 2000. No, it was in 96.
Okay.
And so for 8 years, I sold that product.
Oh, okay.
I had a bunch of collegiate licenses that my father had helped me get because it was a capital intensive business. I didn't have any money. Look, until Storm Stoppers, I never made any money.
Right.
I mean, I'm used to living on $20,000 a year.
Right.
That's paying my own rent, my own gas, etc. I've struggled my whole life until Storm Stoppers. So in the fall of 2004, we had 4 hurricanes hit the state. Charlie was the first one. I don't know if you were living in.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was living in Tampa, Florida. Yeah.
Do you remember Hurricane Charlie?
And this was when, 2008?
No, 2004.
2004.
So it was like Friday the 13th, August 13th.
I'd taken off by then. I was on the run by then. But yeah, I do remember. I mean, I've lived in Florida most of my life. There's always hurricanes every year or two.
So Charlie was a Cat 4 hurricane. It came ashore in Punta Gorda, and then it traversed the state. I remember it knocked out power in Orlando for a week. It uprooted tree. I mean, they had these big trees, and you would see that the grass under them would peel back, and the tree would fall over, leaving this, 6x6 hulk of grass. So when that hurricane was approaching, everyone was scrambling, and I was in this business that happened to use corrugated plastic and a 3M fastener that most people are going to think is Velcro, and you couldn't get plywood. They were like on the local TV station saying, the local Home Depot just got a truckload, and it would sell out in 10 minutes.
Right.
So myself and my then girlfriend thought, what the hell? Let's use what we have.
Right.
And it worked. I mean, it worked. It was thin corrugated plastic, 1/8 thick, which you would see as a real estate sign.
Yeah.
They called it corrugated plastic, same stuff as real estate. It was flimsy, you cut with the scissors, etc., but it worked. And then another storm was approaching, and I approached a local TV station and said, hey, I got this plywood alternative. And even though I don't stockpile pallets and pallets of it, because I'm a little guy, plastic companies all over the state have pallets of this stuff. You ought to be directing your viewers to go buy it. And they interviewed me on my step at my house and said, wow, this and they used the brand that we are, Plywood Alternative. And that kind of created a huge industry, and it's kind of grown from there. So Shark Tank was 2014. So 10 years after inventing Storm Stoppers.
They called you? You called them?
No, for years I had been trying to get on. So to get on Shark Tank, now it's a little bit different. Now they're in their season 14. I'm in season 6. And now you'll hear about entrepreneurs where they actually, hello, is this Joe Blow? Yes, this is so-and-so from Shark Tank. We'd like you to come. I mean, how can you be so lucky as to be recruited, right? But I had to film a video, and they liked my video. And then I caught a really lucky break.
Right. What was that?
Well, one of my ideas to get on Shark Tank was I was going to hire a former quarterback to throw footballs at my Storm Stoppers on the set.
Okay.
And so I joined a bunch of retired NFL players associations, and anyone can join them.
Right.
And, I reached out to like Brett Favre, he wanted a private jet and, I don't know, a $20,000 fee. And I was like, if I had that, why would I go on Shark Tank?
Right.
Donovan McNabb, probably like 40 or 50 second tier quarterbacks. Good name brand, but I mean, Brett was probably the most elite, but guys that I thought I could get. And in doing that, I made contact with a lady named Karen Conrad. and she was the president of the Kansas City Chiefs NFL Retired Players Association.
Okay.
And so I had cultivated this relationship with her, and she liked me, I think. And one day, sometime in the fall of 2013, she said, long story short, I have the cell number of one of the Shark Tank producers, and I'll text it to you. So I had this number for like 3 months, and I knew I could only call him once.
Right.
And make a pitch. And I knew he wouldn't answer. And so I was working in Louisiana. I'll never forget. I was so nervous. At the time, I had my little Bluetooth around my ear, and I set it in my cup holder in my rental vehicle that was full of water. That's how nervous I was about calling this guy. Because I knew, it was like the money shot in pool.
Right.
I got one shot. And like I thought, about a minute later, the phone rings, and it's his assistant saying, so-and-so likes you and wants you to shoot a video. And it kind of grew from there. So had Karen Conrad from the Kansas City Chiefs not given me my lucky break, I would have never gotten on Shark Tank. Nice. Yeah.
Did you get any money? They make any offer or no?
I didn't even get an offer. They all praised Storm Stoppers, but I spoke to Lori for the longest time, and she kept saying she could get us into Home Depot. And I kept saying that'd be a mistake. And she was like, why? No one ever says that's a mistake. Big box stores, they make entrepreneurs sign this contract that says guaranteed sale. And the way it works is, sure, they'll buy a huge amount, but the guaranteed sale says whatever they don't sell after 3 or 6 months, you have to buy back.
Right.
I was like, that's screwy. They buy it, they own it. And then the other thing that's really screwy about the big box stores is they make a big stink about, oh, you're in Home Depot, but then they slow pay you.
Right.
They'll buy this big order that you have to then finance, and they pay you in 90 days, 120 days, and they have all these restrictive language in their contract. I'm like, screw that.
Yeah, I had heard that about Walmart, that Walmart will practically bankrupt you, slowly putting off, like they don't pay you for like 90 days.
And they're a $1 billion company. If anyone has the money to pay you, them.
Right. So you have to go out and you have to finance, several $1 million worth of products to fund all their stores. And then they have to sell that. And then if they decide to put your product in a shitty area of the store, you don't get the sales. And then you're stuck with, okay, well, I didn't get any sales, but you also stuck me in the back far corner. You didn't put up you didn't advertise it. You didn't do some of the things you were going to do, and you can't fight Walmart. And then they send you half the money that you should have gotten, and you now have financed these. You've got this massive payment. And yeah, I knew a guy that knew a guy that was providing like T-shirts for Walmart for something, and he did it for like 3 years or something. And he said I was just sick to my stomach every quarter. It was horrible. And then he said finally one day something happened, and the check came in for almost nothing, and he had to go bankrupt. He's like I thought, he said, what I had always prayed for was to get into Walmart. I then got in. He's like, and it ruined my business. It just destroyed him.
Well, and the thing is, my pitch to the Sharks was, look, we sell direct. It's kind of worked out for Amazon.
Right.
It's worked out for Dell Computer. Right. But the Sharks, I think, were like, when they get a big order and they're busy. And whenever you hear this, the Sharks invest their own money, blah, blah, blah. Here's where that comes from, in my opinion. So each episode, first, there's 2 taping weeks. There's one like in June and then one in September. So Shark Tank flies entrepreneurs out in June and September. So there's maybe 10 days, and it's a typical day. We'll see anywhere from 4 to 7 entrepreneurs. Well, the Sharks get paid per episode. So let's say they get paid $50,000 an episode. And let's say a given day, they have a minimum of 3 to 4 episodes and a max of, say, 6, right? So a minimum 3 episodes times $50,000 as their fee. 150 grand is their kitty that day, up to a max of say 300. So when it's like the Sharks invest their own money, they're getting paid 200 grand that day.
Right.
Right. So let's say they make an offer of 80 grand. They're not out anything. It comes out of their fee, in my opinion. So, so there's 2 tapings, and also they test you. A lot of people don't know, to get flown out there. By the time I flew out there in early June of 2014, I'm season 6. Now they're in season 14. And Storm Stoppers, if you Google it, we're on the most re-aired episode in history. It's called the 100th episode. I don't know how, as Dad used to say, I'd rather be lucky than good.
Yeah.
Because the 100th episode, they sit around afterwards and they have a big cake. Anyone that, because, people don't know where Storm Stoppers is. We're first on the 100th episode, but that's the episode with Squatty Potty. So if you've ever seen Squatty Potty, you've missed us, because they're third, we're first.
Right.
Right. And the greatest thing was they chose us. We may not have gotten an offer, but what a great honor. I can't, and the Sharks, although Mark Cuban was a bit of a jerk.
But he is a bit of a jerk.
Or a big jerk.
Yeah.
Right.
That's his thing.
He praised Storm Stoppers. I have an iPhone here, right?
Right.
And have you read anything about Steve Jobs?
Have I read anything about
Steve Jobs? Was he a nice person?
No, he was a horrible person.
Yeah, but are you buying
he admitted he was a horrible person.
Right, but you're buying an iPhone. You're not buying, the Sharks were like, I really liked the entrepreneur. When you buy Coke stock, you're not buying the backstory of the CEO. You're buying what the product does.
I was going to say, typically the problem is with people, especially nowadays, they want you to be sweet and nice and wonderful. But the truth is that the guy that gets things done is typically not the nice, sweet, wonderful, caring person. He's probably a narcissistic prick that pushes everybody that nobody really likes, but he's also the guy that gets things done.
How dare you talk about Mark Cuban and call him narcissistic?
But that's, Or listen, Steve Jobs, I don't know if you, I forget the name of the guy's names, like Isaac.
Yeah, Walter Isaacson.
Wrote his, I read
his, it's about this thick.
It is thick.
Yeah.
I read it in prison.
Yeah.
Listen, does not paint him.
Did you like it?
I thought it was great. I thought it was too long, and I thought it was but he was also an amazing person and deserved that much coverage. But and look, what was great about Steve Jobs was toward the end of his life when he convinced him, he wanted him to write his book, and he had a conversation with him. He's like, look, you're not micromanaging this. If I write it, any brutal things that people say, it's going to be what it is. And he was like, I'm totally okay with that. And so Steve Jobs was okay with being, he knew I'm a prick. He was okay with being presented that way. So when I read that book and people said nasty things, and he also had a ton of people that said amazing things about him. And he was clearly an amazing person, even though it always to this day will bother me that he didn't take a lot of showers when he was,
you see pictures of his house that had no furniture.
Yeah, he was,
eccentric.
Yeah, listen, but all of those guys are, all of them end up being, nut jobs.
Bill Gates isn't.
Bill Gates is a nut job.
Steve Ballmer isn't.
They're all fucking jerk offs. Are you kidding me? Steve Jobs. Bill Gates is a horrible human being.
I would disagree.
Why?
I remember my father. My father's company was called Anderson Consulting, and he used to tell stories of they would do a consulting project with Microsoft. Okay. And so Dad was in the room with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer, that name may not be familiar to you. He was Bill Gates' more or less right-hand man. It's kind of like at Google. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Google, the CEO now is a guy named Eric Schmidt. The founders are Larry and Sergey Brin and Larry, whose last name escapes me. But back to Dad, he would talk about Steve Ballmer. he was the former or current owner of the either the LA, I think it's the LA Clippers. The one he bought Donald Sterling. I don't know if you remember that name. He was kind of like a racist NBA owner, and they kicked him out.
And he owned a ton of real estate in New York and slums and
and he was just kind of an awful person. Steve Ballmer bought his share. I think it's the Clippers. It's the Clippers because Phil Knight. No. Another tech person bought the Portland Trailblazers. And anyways, Dad would talk about being in a room with Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. And he would be like, Bill had this kind of whiny voice, and Steve Ballmer was the real decision maker. He was like, Bill would start whining about something. I mean, this Dad's parrot. I never met Bill Gates.
Right.
And then Steve Ballmer would be like, look, here's what we're going to do. And Steve Ballmer's a big, authoritative guy. He's bald. In that regard, he's like my mom's main attorney, Kenny Kemp. But anyways, Dad would tell stories. And so I wouldn't shortchange Bill Gates. Dad was always really kind of complimentary of the two of them. To build a company like that, you can't be ruthless like Steve Jobs.
I think that's what it takes to build a company like that, is probably being ruthless. I mean, Bill Gates was ruthless. He would buy out competitors. He would threaten small vendors that he wanted a piece of everything that they sold. Like, he had a bunch of tactics that he performed that were unethical. There was lots of things that he did, going in and getting the
the greatest thing he did.
What? Microsoft stealing the
operating system.
The operating system from Microsoft.
They didn't steal it. He was just strategic.
Yeah. So to say, like, just because you're polite and friendly in person doesn't mean that you're not,
Bill Gates at least
screwing people on the side. No,
Microsoft takes. Look, my youngest sister Casey, worked at Microsoft. Microsoft takes care of their staff, or maybe takes care of executives like Casey. So I would say that unless we know particulars, Steve Jobs had a reputation, but anything written about Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer does not portray them in a negative light. Steve Jobs, on the other hand, you and I both read the book. It was mean to waiters.
Or maybe Bill Gates is just got an easier, or got a heavier thumb on what his on the censors and how he is portrayed in the media. If you go into Russia right now, 90% of the citizens will tell you Putin's a wonderful human being. Well, yes, you get that reputation when you're in 100% control of the media. So I'm sure but it doesn't matter. We don't have to all agree. It's, maybe he's a wonderful person. So anyway, so what's next?
Yeah. So we were last on Storm Stoppers and Shark Tank. No, I didn't get an offer. I spoke to Lori for the longest time. But the coolest thing was when I walked out, and I didn't see this till it actually aired. She turns to Robert and she goes, "It's a really smart product." And Robert goes, "I'm with you, Lori." And then they pan over to Mark Cuban, who didn't like me. Right. He met me, knew me an hour, and he had his mind made up.
It's funny. It's funny how many people it's crucial to them that the person that they're working with, they like. It really, and that always amazes me. Like, to me, I don't care if I hate your guts. I don't care if you hate my guts. If you can get it done, then that's it. I'll put my pride aside. You know what I'm saying? But there's so many people that oh, no. Well, I don't like the way he talked to me, or I don't like that. Well, so what? He's got this. He can do this. He's good at it. He can get this. He can actually execute it. I don't have to like this fucking guy. We're not going to dinner. we're not friends. And I don't mean you. I just mean in general, anybody in general. But so many people nowadays like, oh, well, he needs to be a nice person and he needs to do this. He needs to give the right charities and we need to have the same values. And what delusional world are you living in? Like that's just because society's so fucking soft now.
Well, I think something that my father stood for, that when I hire someone or someone I want to do business with, I have to be able to trust them.
Right.
Being able to trust, you know what the best agreement is?
A handshake, right?
Right. Looking in someone's eyes. So often, if you can't, like when I hire contractors, do I care if they're licensed by the city or state? No. I care they show up on time. I care they do good work. But if someone does a shitty job at my house or a business and they're licensed, the license doesn't protect me.
Right.
So their work, if they were a referral, that counts more to me than most people. Not that I would ever admit to hiring unlicensed people or technically, in the Storm Stopper realm, whenever you buy plywood at Home Depot, right, you're required to get a permit. But every county in
nobody
Florida,
enforces that.
They don't enforce it, right?
If you change your faucet, you're supposed to get a permit. If you change your toilet, you're supposed to get a nobody's doing that. Nobody, Okay, so your father.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so your father. So at what point in time are we right now?
So my father died at the age of 72 in August 21st, 2013.
Right.
So what? He was a cigar smoker. He died of inoperable liver cancer.
Okay.
So he was diagnosed in February of 2013.
And that's from cigars, or or you just a contributing factor?
You don't really know. Like, he smoked cigars his whole life. Myself, I don't smoke. I don't drink.
Right.
Who knows? After the age of 70, one of the things that I find really interesting about you, Matt, I've read your book.
Okay.
I highly recommend anyone that wants a good read. I just finished it. Not to sound like I'm sucking up to you, but It's true. Look, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't say I liked it.
Right.
And also, one thing that you don't explain in the book is the title. The title, Shark in the Housing Pool, in my opinion, came from a Business Week article that you mentioned in the book.
Right.
Right. But there's nothing like about Shark in the Housing Pool. The title came from a Business Week article. Yeah. I had to kind of figure that out.
You have to give the reader some credit. You don't have to. I figured anybody who's reading it at that point would say, "Oh, that's probably where you got the title from."
Well, like my book, which when you flash it up, that picture with Mickey Mouse, came from a Disney cruise.
Okay.
Right, and someone that read an early version of it said you need to explain the picture. Right. And so the first couple pages, I explain how did we get a family picture with Dad with Mickey Mouse.
Right.
And so, anyways, I'm off track.
Your father died. He died of inoperable.
Right.
Of cancer or something. Right.
He died of cancer. So that's the cool thing about tape is you can back it up and go over all the.
Yeah, we probably won't.
Yeah. All right.
Listen, I was sitting here thinking to myself when you said my book was good, it was great. I was thinking, well, I know Connor read it, but I know Connor's never read anything. I don't think Connor's ever watched an entire video if he wasn't editing it.
No.
Yeah, probably you were talking about, I don't explain we had talked about my book, that I never explained the title, and then you were explaining, I think it was leading into you explaining the title of your book.
No, I wasn't doing that as a lead into the book. It just kind of happened. But back to your book. I read it all last week. It's how many pages is it? Because
like 330.
Yeah. And the interesting thing to me about it was you said you wrote it when you were in prison.
Right.
So the thought that went into it, and also the thing, I like your chutzpah in, I bought a car at XYZ Ford, and it felt like if I Googled that, it would take me to, wherever you bought the car.
Right. The
authenticity, look, I've been sued for defamation by...
Oh, yeah. Your parent. Yeah.
Yeah. So I took my mother's attorney's lies and put them on a shirt verbatim, and he sued me, and that case is going to trial in like 6 weeks. So I took someone's lies, his exact words, and put them on a shirt, and I felt like you were taking a similar risk in putting someone's actual...
And I've had people say that, right? One...
just like, you didn't have their permission to use their real name or, to talk about.
No, but what I did have was I had things that were in public record. And a lot of times, like if I say I bought this vehicle it's a lot of times people will say, man, they'll really say, you got a great memory. But the truth is, I really had my discovery. So the government would say, Mr. Cox bought this vehicle, paid $50,000 for this vehicle at, Charles Earnhardt Ford. So now because I can't remember the date.
Yeah.
But in the book, like they'll have usually I didn't bore people with the exact date. I'd say like in, late April or early, May, whatever. Sometimes I use the exact date if I was like a closing. Like on this day, on the 22nd of May, I closed on this house, borrowed this much money. 2 days later, I borrowed this much money on the same house. A week later, so I would do that. But I had those dates and those names, mostly not because I have good memory, but mostly because it was a part of my discovery in some form. And also, but the people's names that I used, those people had been interviewed by the FBI or the Secret Service, the U.S. Marshals, or they'd been in newspaper articles. So a lot of that stuff I was pulling from public records, or they had been listed on an indictment, so they were already out there. But my whole thing was, which is different than yours, is that you're being sued because these people are trying to shut you down. In my case, I felt, if someone sues me because I use their name, then they now have to go in front of the court and say, one, you slandered my name. And at the time, and like I know people in prison, right? So I can get legal work done very inexpensively. So what my whole thing was, I was like, I'll just prepare a document, provide all the proof, and now all the things that you're saying, he smeared my name, I can say, I got it from this article, I got it from these 3 documents where you talk to the U.S. attorneys, I got it from the indictment, which you're listed on, and these are things that you said to me because you were a part of this fraud. The people in my book that I've spoke bad about don't want to do that because they know, what if Matt provides all of these documents? Now, not only am I listed in a book, I'm now got a lawsuit in federal court where he's now showing all the actual documents that prove that I did help commit this fraud and was involved with this fraud. Right now, it's just a name in a book. It doesn't really come up. I'm not that worried about it.
And also, if they allege slander, they take this and it blows up.
Absolutely. And I could turn around, and anytime there's a lawsuit filed, knowing me, I'll turn around, I'll hit up 10 different reporters and say, hey, by the way, I'm being sued by this person about my book. It gives me an opportunity to get an article written. Now you're in the news. Now you're going to end up in New Times Magazine or Rolling Stone or who knows what magazine, the Tampa Tribune, who knows what magazine might pick it up and write a 500 or a 1,500 word article about me being sued over this book, which only gives me more publicity. And now it puts you on the page 2 of the St. Petersburg Times, which is closed, but or the Atlantic Journal-Constitution now runs it how this guy's being sued because he said this person slandered him, but there's all this evidence that shows he was a part of this major fraud, and it talks about the book. People aren't stupid. What they do is they get that. I wouldn't be surprised if 5 or 6 people haven't gone to some attorney, yelled and said, "Look, this is what's happening. I want to sue him." The attorney looked at it and said, "Okay, listen, here's what's going to happen. Here's what it's going to cost you to sue him. Now, if you want to give me $15,000 or $25,000 to sue him, and in the end, he gets the lawsuit thrown out of court because he can provide all the documentation, and he didn't really slander you. You can't prove that it cost you money or harmed you. So the issue is you're going to cost yourself $25,000 to maybe be more embarrassed about something that you actually did." Now, as opposed to, in your case, you're being sued because the lawyers are hoping to get you in a position where they financially harmed you to such a degree that you drop all of these allegations and just go away and stop complaining. And that's what they're in my opinion, that's what their real goal is, because you can show hey, you said this, which was a lie, and you lied to the court. And here's the proof. Here's the proof. And those suing you anyway. So they're trying to get you to a position where they can get a judgment, where they can get favor with the court in those proceedings to get a judgment against you or get you shut down in some way. Because the truth is, I know over and over again, many times, if you're a lawyer, you're an officer of the court, and you show evidence to the court, and then there's evidence that contradicts that, the court's going to go with the lawyer. So if the lawyer spins it or twists it in such a way that he can get a good result from them, then he's going to do that. And on top of that, it cost him nothing to sue you. He's a fucking lawyer. Yeah.
In my case, there's actually two lawsuits, and we should probably drill down. But first, I'd like to...
Yeah, let's go back to your father. Sorry. Let's go back to your father dying, or your passed away. Sorry.
Right. So Dad died in 2013. Now, I've learned this in hindsight. I didn't know it at the time. So I'm 55. When he died, I was 45. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary. So he died in 13. What I learned since was in 1998, Dad created a trust. Now, there's wills and there's trusts.
Yes.
Do you know the difference? I had to learn. I didn't know.
I feel like I kind of know the difference. I mean, typically you have a will and it kind of liquidates everything in the will, and a trust is kind of like a living instrument that goes on, right? That is set up to do certain things that can continue. And that's my opinion. A will is kind of finite. This is who gets this. It determines who gets everything, and then it's done.
Right.
That to me is the difference, but I could be wrong.
Here's what I've learned, and like you, I may be wrong. A wills is a vehicle to identify who your beneficiaries are.
Right. Okay.
Here's my wife. Here are my kids. Here's all my assets, etc. The trust is really the vehicle to dispose of your assets. So the will says, like my dad's will, is 8 pages long, and it's very non-specific. My wife, Mary Frances Smith, my 5 kids, I'm his only son, John D. Smith Jr. Then I have a sister named Jennifer Smith, a sister named Kristin Smith. Of course, they have marital names. A sister named Karen Smith and a sister named Casey Smith. So his will just identifies us kids, the wife, and it basically says, upon my death, sell my furniture and follow the terms of my trust. The trust is the vehicle. And I was told back in 2018, long before I filed my 2018 lawsuit against my birth mother, and I call her my birth mother, and this is a big distinction. Anyone that's listening might have, how dare you sued your mother? Mm-hmm. And look, in reading your book, Matt, your mother visited you every 2 weeks for...
Yeah, it's for 13 years.
I mean, that's a mother.
Right.
And a mother goes to your wedding, etc. what my mother did was wait till my father was vulnerable and forge his signature on a new trust that made her sole trustee. I don't think that's behavior consistent with most people's definition of a mother. So I call her birth mother. So Dad, he had a trust, and basically mother didn't like the terms of it. So she just waited till he couldn't say no. And that's my first lawsuit's about that. But because I'm kind of a vocal opposition to my mother and her lying attorneys, and we'll introduce you to some of them. I'm being sued by one of her lying attorneys for reprinting his lies on a T-shirt and filming a video about his lies. But back to my father's trust, and look, this is what I've learned, and I'm so honored by the interest. I think everyone deals with, the name of my book is called Family Fraud. Everyone deals with that. You know, someone dies, and not everyone is honorable when the, you know, strong leader of the family, like my father was, is gone. And so greed happens, theft happens. Everyone deals with this. Just Google like family fraud. They call it familiar.
Family members. Yeah, they're people that you're close with.
Yeah, but they use the word FAMILIAR, like you're familiar with something.
Right.
But they use it in a different context. Familiar fraud.
Right.
It's a weird kind of word. So you have to overcome, you know, you sued your mother. Look, if you view her as a mother, you would never question why, you know, John, my sisters, this is kind of their argument. John, all the money went to mom, except Dad's trust in 1998. Right. Dad's trust said, wait a sec. All the money doesn't go to mom. Right. Dad's trust says half the money goes to mom. The other half goes in a family trust to benefit my 5 kids.
Right.
And each kid can't withdraw their share until they're 45 and 55. And the big thing was Dad chose his bank to be the trustee. So this was in 98. I didn't learn about this until later. Dad's wishes were follow my trust.
Right.
Mother knew about this, you know, for 15 years. And I guarantee you, you know, my dad was, if I'm stubborn and belligerent, you know, like father, like son, I guarantee you, mother was like, come on, make me the trustee. Oh, come on. I've been married to you for 47 years. I put up with your cigar smoking and your farting in bed and all sorts of stuff. Right. And Dad was like, no effing way. It's my, you know.
Yeah.
She just waited until he couldn't say no. And so Dad had a trust, and 16 days before he died, he was on home hospice. Now, picture this. Do you remember, and I don't want to cut, besides your mother and your father?
My mother was on hospice, yeah.
Hospice, okay. So
she's completely dependent on everybody around her to help her do anything or say anything, or she's on her way out.
Vulnerable?
Yeah, extremely vulnerable.
Extremely vulnerable. And yet, at the time, you were probably like, you know, Mom, can I?
Yeah, she was extremely vulnerable the last few years of her life in general. Just, you know, when you're being weighted on hand and foot by everybody around you, like her mind was gone years before, and she was still fairly sharp, but it wasn't hard to convince her to do anything if you wanted her to.
So let's say, hypothetically, if maybe not a sibling, although I'd like to use the example of a sibling, but let's just say someone you trusted or thought you trusted swindled your mother. How would you feel?
I mean, I would be, you know, obviously I would be furious, but you know, what's funny about that is that, like, you know, I have examples of her being taken advantage of by family members.
Give me one.
So, just being asked to pay for this or buy this or use your American Express card to buy this, or don't you want to buy so-and-so this, grandma or whatever it is. And it's, of course. Well, I mean, she's feeble-minded. She doesn't know how much money she doesn't even understand how her bills are being paid. Like, she thinks I've got plenty of money, but the truth is you don't have plenty of money anymore. The money's gone.
Would you agree there's nothing worse than that? Like taking advantage of a vulnerable elderly person, no different than taking advantage of a kid.
Well, that's the worst. I mean, that's one of the worst things. Like, people talk about my crime all the time, right? Guys will go on and they'll say, like, to me, 99% of all my victims are banks,
right? Institutions,
banks and insurance. Or sorry, the title insurance companies that had to maybe repay the bank. Or I have 4 individual victims, right? All of them perfectly within, mentally capable of their faculties, 100%. And it's less than $30,000 between all of them. And I didn't take any money from them. They just hired an attorney to fix what the damage I'd done to their house's title, whatever. Which in and of itself is a horrible thing. And I certainly, should have known that was going to happen at the time. Complete scumbag move on my part. But what always gets me is people and I usually, if somebody says, man, you're a scumbag for that. Absolutely. If you say I'm a scumbag for what I did, I agree with you. But when guys will come in the comment section and go, this guy's a piece of shit. He stole from old people. Whoa. Like, that's their go-to move, because you know why? Because they know that's the worst thing you could say to someone. That's one of the worst things you could accuse a fraudster of. Being a fraudster in general makes you a piece of garbage. But when you specifically went out of your way to steal from old people, people are disgusted by. Fraudsters are typically disgusted with each other. It's like, okay, bro, I took Visa for 20 grand. You went and stole 80,000 from an old person. Like, what are they going to do? Like, they can't bounce back. They can't work an extra year or two and replenish that money. Like, that's fucked up. So I know exactly what you're saying. And I was going to say another thing is, before we get too into it, is that your sister's saying that, mom wouldn't do this or family members wouldn't do that. Listen, I've seen family members in many other families, when money is involved, people start cutting each other's throats. And I mean, it's despicable. I have a friend, Treon, his father died. And that's it.
I wanted to ask you, is that his real first name?
Yeah, Treon.
Treon?
Yes. There's like Treon, Troy, and Trent was the three boys' names. And his dad died like a year or so ago. And when he passed away, before he passed away, Treon was at the hospital with him. And he said, so I'm sitting there with my dad. He said, the guy, like, he said, in like the same room, but like over further, passed away. He said, and while they were sitting there with their father, as the father like died, I want to say this is how he said it happened. He said, like, as soon as the doctor said, he's gone, he said, we're talking about, he said, there's like 3 guys there. There's 2 girls, 3 guys, a couple kids. Immediately, as soon as they said, okay, he's passed away. One of the brothers goes, I get the truck, bro. I get the truck. And he goes, no, man, you don't get the, listen, man, I'm the one that put the new wheels on that truck. And somebody else is like, look, I don't care. I want his furniture. I went like, he said, Treon he was like, the guy wasn't even cold. And they were already fighting over his furniture and his truck. Treon, he said, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. But that's how people, those are obviously scumbags, but people, when money is involved, what people are really like when money's involved.
Well, let me sketch out what happened the 16 days before Dad died. So see if this makes any sense. And by the way, to any listener that wants to read my family fraud book,
okay.
On my website, familyfraud.net, they can download it for free and I assume you'll.
Yeah, we'll put the link in the description box.
Yeah. And I did that to honor you because I'm so thrilled. This is the first publicizing of my story. I wrote the book last summer, and I realized, ultimately I'm probably going to lose on my case because, my mother's stolen $30 million, is funding all this, legal action against me. What wins in a civil lawsuit? Money, right? Yeah. And they got more stolen money. I borrowed $150,000 from my bank. Matter of fact, I was just declared indigent by the Lee County clerk of the court. I don't know if you're familiar with the indigent statute.
I was in federal prison. I fought my whole case on indigent.
Yeah. So indigents, you can't own a vehicle worth more than $4,000. Real property, you have to have net equity of less than like $3,000 or $4,000. I meet all those criteria, and that was their whole game plan. So anyone, look, on paper, had my family followed my father's wishes, if Dad was worth $30 million, according to his trust, his 1998 trust, and by the way, on that date, he also created a trust for Mom, and they're both December 14th, 1998. But in his trust, had his trust been followed, half his wealth, or $15 million, according to Mom, would go to Mom, and the other $15 million would go to his 5 children.
Right.
So on paper, and I'm sure some of your viewers, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the comments are like, this is just sour grapes.
Right.
He was cheated out of $3 million. And, I think of my father. Do you think your mom a lot?
I think about my mom all the time.
Every day?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
No, as much as I try not to. So.
And you think of her, you probably also think of what she meant to you. You probably also think of her values.
Right.
Like, give me 3 values about your mother.
She was hardworking. She was extremely.
She worked her whole life?
She worked she worked in different capacities. I think of obviously being a homeowner or being a housewife as part of that. But she was extremely hard worker. And
do you think you get your work ethic from her?
Her and my dad. My dad, when you said, oh, I worked, 80, 90 hours a week. Like, I don't think people realize how much working that is. And I've done that. Like I worked 96 hours a week for about three or 4 months one time, and that's literally 12 hours a day, not including drive time. So driving an hour to work. So working 12 hours, driving an hour. I was working 14 hours a day. I was either in my vehicle or working, and I did that for like 4 or 5 months. Well, about 4 month.
And long before cell phones. So it's not like you could.
No, this is back in the late 80s. But I was going to say, my father worked 10 to 12 hours a day. Like, he worked, this is a guy that left at, 7, 8 in the morning and got back at 6 o'clock at night and expected to have, dinner on the table. My mother raised 4 kids. She wasn't doing that. She was a school teacher. She worked in the garden, kept up the whole house, did all the things that she did, listen, super, good values. She was a great mother, great wife. So yeah, honest, hardworking, very hardworking, always pushing, always striving to want her kids to be better. So yeah.
You're also in my opinion, you're also really generous. I mean, granted, I was pitching you something, but you actually spent time. Do you think one of your mother's values was being generous?
No, she was super. Listen, I had a girlfriend that I dated. I met her when I was like 16 or 17. She was 15, 16. My parents helped buy her first car. After she and I broke up, my father financed a vehicle for her and let her make payments every month for 5 years. My mother, after My mother used to call her every few months and say, I'm going to Ross or I'm going to Marshall's. Would you like to come with me? When can you go? And she would tell her day off, take her with her, and then have her pick things out and pay for them. So yeah, my mom she was great.
Yeah. So, my father had the same, I would say his three main values were family, being generous, and hard work.
Right.
I think there's less, there's greater values, but I don't know what they are. Like, when he died, what I wanted of his were his passports. We all got, he was cremated. We all got, 1/6 of his cremains, right?
Right.
And this was a kind of a ironic video I filmed. I was in this, I went on vacation a couple years ago to this cute little town called Gualala. It's spelled Guallala. It's about 100 miles north of San Francisco, and the town sits like on a cliff. And I don't know if you've ever driven on US 1 in California. I think it's scary. If you're just distracted for a minute, you drive off the cliff. There's no guardrails and stuff. It freaks me out.
No.
So I was in Gualala, and I had his ashes for 7 years. You're just sitting there. I was in this beautiful place, and I thought I ought to throw his ashes, disperse his ashes to nature. And so I'm narrating this video, and I'm like, in this lawsuit, my mother's attorney, his name is Kenny Kemp, and he's a little guy. You say you're little. I mean, if you're 5'7", he's the height of an Oompa Loompa.
Right.
I mean, he's little, and he hates being little. He drives like one of these pickup trucks you need a stepladder to get into, and I'm pretty sure he wears lifts in his boots. I didn't see any lifts in your shoes.
Well, they're hidden well.
You say in a good pair of shoes. So I think you're probably closer to 5'9".
No.
Yeah. Look,
Listen,
I'm 6
I'm like 5'6". I'm 5'7".
I'm 6'2". That means you're 7 inches shorter than me.
Easily.
Now maybe it's the big afro. I noticed you're wearing your hair in an afro. Maybe that adds a couple of inches. But anyways, my father had this trust. He died. Oh, so let me set the scene. All right, your mother's in hospice. So you know what it's like. All right. So dad's in hospice. My sister Karen sent an email a week before this magical day when apparently Dad, he creates his trust in 98 with his Illinois attorney and his bank trustee, First National Bank of Chicago, now Chase. And then one day, August 5th, 2013, he's like, fuck it. I'm going to change everything. And I've been keeping all this money from my wife. I'm going to give her everything. Except I'm not going to have my Illinois attorney present, and I'm not going to have my bank trustee present. That sounds legit, right? Right. Yeah,
right,
fuck it.
Something's wrong. Yeah.
Something's wrong, right? And the signatures don't line up.
Why wouldn't the new attorney at least work so that for the sake of not appearing to have an issue, why wouldn't the attorney ask them to be present?
Ask who to be present?
The Illinois attorney and the bank representative. That's a
really good question.
I mean, even if they're not doing anything that's unethical, like why not go ahead and request them to be there just so that it doesn't come up in the future?
Oh, okay. Well, you're assuming you're dealing with an ethical attorney,
right?
Okay.
Which is funny too, because there are so many people out there that if they have no real. Like everything they know about the law, they watch Law and Order, they watch some program, and everything they know about, legal, they've watched these programs and they think, well, that's how it is. Like the law profession is they're all very ethical and they're always concerned. But the truth is I've met so many shisty scumbag what is it? What's the Saul? Better Call Saul kind of, those kinds of tricky, changing this, altering this, those kind of attorneys that are out there that most people don't realize that there's a huge chunk of crooked attorneys that are out there. It's just not hard to find one.
I would not say that attorney Chris Marsala.
No, I'm sure he's salted. I'm sure he's salt of the earth. He's probably great. Very ethical.
I'm sure. So I would never accuse him of being unethical. But I happen to have some of his work here, and I'd like to share it with you. I know we're jumping around here. So this, first, let me set the scene for attorney Marsala. Right. Okay. So my attorney has deposed him. Right. He has to testify under oath.
Right.
And apparently under oath is like, oh, I better not lie. I'm under oath.
Right.
But my experience has been, if someone's a liar, under oath doesn't really matter. If they're in court, under oath doesn't really matter. If they're a liar, they're a liar.
Right.
A tiger can't change his or her stripes. Tigers are always boys. Aren't there female tigers?
Tigresses.
Anyways, so dad's on home hospice. Now, attorney Christopher Marsala, who in my video, I don't call him attorney Chris Marsala. I call him attorney Marsupial.
Right.
I picked a name. I was trying to think of something that was kind of like oily, and marsupials, don't they have that pouch? I couldn't even tell you what a marsupial is.
Is a kangaroo a marsupial?
I don't know. I'm not.
If you're thinking he's going to look something up, like this is not. Oh. This isn't Joe Rogan where I've got a guy that's looking anything up. He's not doing it.
Anyways, so attorney Marsupial or Marsala, I did keep the same M, Marsala, right. Marsupial. Whereas my mother's attorney, instead of using his real name, Kenny Kemp, I used the complimentary name attorney Mel Practice. Mel, the Old English.
I can't believe you're being sued. It's shocking. Go ahead.
It's not shocking. You have to understand, I paid particular attention. It's a complimentary name because Mel comes from the Old English Melvin, which is a protector of the council. And in Latin, mel means honey, which when I say malpractice, now I know where you're going. You're going that I'm really saying malpractice.
Right.
Right? Alleging that he's committed any of a variety of malpractice, but I would never use that word because it's spelled with a different letter. M-A-L practice.
It makes all makes sense to me now.
Well, you change one letter.
It changes everything.
And it changes the whole context. Mel, M-E-L, goes to Old English or it goes to Latin. Of course, you'd have to change. Look, I'm not really good
Let's paint the scene. Paint
the scene. So we have attorney Chris Marsala in Naples. Now, he's an hour away from Dad, and Dad is on home hospice. Could your mother travel anywhere when she was on home hospice? No. So attorney Chris Marsala travels an hour each way to get 2 notarized signatures. Now, he's a notary, and the American or Florida Notarological Society, whatever it's called, the Maine Notary Association, they set limits on what notary publics can charge to notarize signature. I think it's maybe like $8 a signature.
Okay.
So this guy, in his deposition, you got to, look, there's disbelief here and there's the truth here. You got to kind of go, it doesn't make any sense. But this would happen. So his testimony is he's never had a client named John D. Smith. He doesn't remember my father named John D. Smith.
Right. You're John D. Smith, Jr.
Jr., right. He's never had a client named Mary F. Smith. He doesn't remember my mother, Mary F. Smith. He doesn't have any representation agreement between him and my dad. He's never had a representation agreement between him and my mom. But on one day, 10 years ago, he drove an hour each way to notarize a couple of signatures for a client he doesn't know and has never met, all to make $8 a signature. Okay. And why does he visit clients at home? Well, he testified in his deposition that, well, when they're physically unable to travel, and physically unable suggests they're in a cast, they broke their hip, they have an ankle, but he doesn't really cover if they're out of it on home hospice. My sister, a week before this fateful day, August 5th, 2013, emailed the family saying, Dad keeps saying things like, how come I'm not in bed? Where's my bed? As he's laying in bed.
Right.
So, Attorney Marsala visits Dad on his deathbed on home hospice on Monday, August 5th, 2013, to make $32 in fees. And this is some of his great work. I'm just going to read it to you so you can see the power of what you're getting when you hire a Naples attorney named Chris Marsala.
Rossini, in the 1990s, was a 20-something-year-old Los Angeles-based drug trafficker of ecstasy and ice. He and his associates drove luxury European supercars, lived in Beverly Hills penthouses, and dated Playboy models while dodging federal indictments. Then, 2 FBI officers with the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force entered the picture. Dirty agents willing to fix cases and identify informants. Suddenly, 2 of Rossini's associates, confidential informants working with federal law enforcement, were murdered. Everyone pointed to Rossini. As his co-defendants prepared for trial, U.S. Attorney Robert Mueller sat down to debrief Rossini at Leavenworth Penitentiary, and another story emerged. A tale of FBI corruption and complicity in murder. You see, Pierre Rossini knew something that no one else knew. The truth. And Robert Mueller and the federal government have been covering it up to this very day. Devil Exposed. A twisted tale of drug trafficking, corruption, and murder in the City of Angels. Available on Amazon and Audible.
Signature on the left is the signature on my father's will. Okay, so the will is dated August 5th, 2013. The signature on the right is my father's alleged signature on the trust, again, dated the same day, August 5th, 2013. What do you see? And I'm just gonna.
Yeah, we were saying they don't look alike. Like there was the huge gap, and the one is.
Do you believe that? I mean, based on what you're saying, I know you're not a forensic document examiner.
They don't look the same.
Could the same person have made both signatures? It's like here he's incapable.
The letters, the way they're writing the letters do not look like it's the same person, wrote those.
And then if the signature
even the D, it's like a completely different style D.
Right. But it's a dramatic turnaround. Right. I believe the signature on the left is legit. That seems to be the signature of a dying man. Would you agree with that? Did you ever see your mom's handwriting?
Well, I mean, in general, is that what his normal signature kind of more or less looks like? Like, was it fairly consistent?
Well,
my signature is fairly consistent. It's very loopy and.
I'm showing you that the viewers can't see this. I'm showing you page 3 from Family Fraud, which they can see this if they go to our website and click on Inside True Crime and download the ebook for free. They just got to fill out a short form.
Yeah, but it's actually click on the logo.
Yeah,
you have to click on my logo is on the website. And you have to click on the actual logo.
Correct. Yeah. So you go to familyfraud.net and click on the Inside true crime. It's like a square.
Yeah, it's just if anybody who's watching this knows what the logo is. It's the barbed wire surrounding two fists. If you click on that, it'll give you a free download.
Right. So what viewers can't see now, this top signature is his signature on his 98 trust. And what Dad did distinctively in my mind was his D. You see how he loops the D and he does this little squiggly thing? I see the bottom, the signature on the right. If you scroll over to the right, Connor. So the right signature, I hired a document examiner and he said, the signature is a forgery. And he said, zoom in to show the writing transfer. Yeah, you zoom into those two signatures. Yeah. All right. You see the gaps in the writing lines?
Right.
My document examiner said, his analysis was affirmed by...
the other one. The other way.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that one. You can tell where it's like someone wrote the name John, and then
he concluded they scanned the signature.
They scanned it?
In other words, that's a drop-in signature from another document.
Oh, okay.
Right? And the only thing that would prove that it's a drop-in signature is to look at the original signed Monday, August 5th, 2013 trust. So my attorney tried to get it from attorney Kenny Kemp, and he goes, it doesn't exist. Now, think of the old saying, 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are
dead. Yeah.
There you go. So if you were going to forge something, what do? Let's just say that's not my dad's signature. And let's say he refused to sign it. Okay. Maybe in a fit of rebellion, he knew what they were trying to do. And he was like, fuck it, I'm not going to sign that, right? And let's say the trust is blank. Do you keep a blank, unsigned trust? No.
All right.
You get rid of it. Right? So when we tried to get not a copy, we want to see the original. My mom's attorney, Kenny Kemp, says, we don't have it. My mom she keeps everything.
Right. There's no way. First of all, there's no way you're not going to have the original. You're going to have the original. And if you're going to throw out anything, you're throwing out copies of it or anything. You're going to try and keep the original.
Why? But why would you not have the original or not want to share it unless it
doesn't exist?
Or it is blank.
Right. And
if it's blank, then...
Well, then it doesn't exist in the form that you're trying to pass it off on. Right.
Yeah, like you, throughout your book, you admitted your mistakes.
Yeah.
And...
Yeah, I've signed many documents in other people's names. And
right. Have you ever... Imagine if you were... Because isn't a forgery... It's really the comparison of an original to a forgery that identifies the forgery. Right. So if you don't have the original, all you have is a copy. Like all my mother and her attorney says they have are copies that this being a copy.
Right.
But let's just say the original was unsigned.
Right.
Then
they're not going to show it.
They're not going to show it, especially because showing an unsigned means that Dad never signed the trust. And that trust, the 2013 trust, made Mom sole trustee. So without Dad's signature, what does Mom have? She has nothing.
She has the original trust that says that the bank is the trustee.
Correct. And the big reason that she did it's a 2-part reason. The first was to steal all the money. And then the second reason was to disinherit me.
Right.
And look, this isn't sour grapes. I feel like I've already won. I mean, I tell people all the time, they're like, you got cheated out of millions. How dare they? And I'm like, look, Dad would say the value, I think of Dad all the time, like you think your mother. Dad would say, the value is a lesser, the money is a lesser value. Think of what you've gained. And this is my honest to God thought, is that first I have my father's values. He was generous. I'm generous. He believed in taking care of his family. although I don't have a birth family anymore because they've made it really clear.
Right.
You know, my mother, you say you're narcissistic.
Right.
My mother is really narcissistic. When I sued her, she disinherited me, disowned. I lost not just my mother and my 4 sisters. None of my sisters can think for themselves. None of my sisters can say, well, what did Dad want? What were Dad's wishes? Are Dad's wishes being followed? All of them are like, they're like lemmings jumping off a cliff, you know? And also, they've benefited.
Right.
2 of my sisters don't work. I'll give you an example. My sister, Kristin, I want to show you a picture of her house. My sister, Kristin, lives in a $600,000 house that Mom bought for cash with the stolen money, by the way.
Is this in Florida?
No, it's in Illinois. It's in Kane County, Illinois. If you know your towns in Kane County, St. Charles, South Elgin, etc.
I was just going to say, a $600,000 house in Florida is a nice house.
Yeah, so this house is right here. If you were to Google that address, and I want to share that address, so it's a 4-bedroom, 3.5 bath, 3,700 square foot, 2-story house. It's beautiful. And they bought it with furnishings, which probably were another 50 grand. So growing up, and it's just my sister in it.
So this is the house of an unemployed person?
She's not unemployed. She works for a animal shelter, and she probably makes, I don't know, 20 grand a year, maybe 30. The taxes on this house are $17,000 a year.
She can cover it.
I don't think someone making 25 grand a year comes up with 17 grand for the taxes. So the thing about this is this house is beautiful. Oh, but growing up, so there's one person in 3,700 square feet. Growing up, we had 7.
This is just for her?
Just for her. Oh, and what did she do to deserve this? Like the old Pet Shop Boys song? What have I done to deserve this? It came out in '88. I love music. She got divorced. And I say in the book, boy, if she got divorced and she gets a $600,000 house, which, by the way, isn't in her name. It's in Mother's name because Mother is a narcissistic.
Right. Well, and she needs to be able to yank her out of the. If she doesn't do what she says, you need to be able to easily say, "Get out of my house."
Except Mother would never do that because all my sisters are kind of lemmings. They all follow. They can't think for themselves. Because any sister, imagine your father's taken advantage of, and you see it right in front of you. One would think my sisters would be like, no, no. Or they'd be like me. They find out after the fact. They would sue. They would say, I'm acting on behalf of my father. How dare these people take advantage of a feeble old man?
Right.
But the main point about my sister Christy's house is there's just one person in it. Growing up, we lived in a house 10% smaller and there were 7 of us in it.
Right.
So like my father's values, my house is 1,000 square feet.
Right.
And it's big. 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's just me in it. It's all I need. I mean, there's rooms in the house I don't use. I don't use the front porch very much. I don't use the back deck very much. So, I mean, I don't need the idea that, Kristin couldn't have said, Mom, wait, it's just me. I don't need 3,700. I got a great idea. Instead of buying a $600,000 house and putting it in your name, why not buy a $200,000 condo and give me the other 400 grand in trust? So if something happens to you, I have liquidity. Mom doesn't do that. Back to, we were setting the scene for Chris Marcella. Dad's on home hospice. Marcella comes to get 2 signatures for a client that he doesn't have and he's never met, and he's never done any work for Dad or for Mom, he says under oath last August in his deposition. And he does all this to get 2 notarized signatures. So let's check the quality of his work here. This is a paragraph, and we're going to put this on the screen. So my dad has a trust in 1998, and he has his trustee as his bank, not my mother. And he has very specific instructions in that trust. And clearly my mother didn't like him. So she just waited and waited until he was on home hospice, vulnerable. You describe your mother. And on August 5th, 2013, has this ethical and honorable attorney, and I say that tongue firmly in cheek. He's kind of a sloppy attorney, Chris Marcella. I'll give you an example. So if you look at the page 7 of the will, which is on the left, right? I'm just going to read it. And again, this is a guy that visits a guy, prepares this document and the trust with the forged signature, and then has his notary stamp, Chris Marcella, on it on the next page. So he's at least got some legal fees tied up into this. And one would think a professional that signs his name would not make such a glaring mistake that no one's caught. My attorney hasn't caught it. No one in the court system has caught it. Let me just read it to you. And this is the affirmation or the affirmatory statement made by the 2 witnesses, Glenn and Carol Murphy, which were our next door neighbors growing up. Quote, "We certify that the foregoing instrument consisting of this and the 6 preceding typewritten pages," we're on page 7, 6 preceding typewritten pages, "was on the date below signed, sealed, published, and declared by John D. Smith Sr. as his last will in our presence, and that we, in his presence and in the presence of each other, have signed our names as witnesses hereto, believing John D. Smith to be of sound mind at the time of signing." And then the money shot right here. "The said John D. Smith Sr., having signed his initials at the bottom of each page and his name at the close of said will." Wow. The Murphys witnessed my father, John D. Smith, sign this will, and they also witnessed him initial every page. So, page 1, is it initialed? No. Page 2, no. Page 3, no. And I know we're only sharing the signature page with you. If anyone that's had a relative, all I can say is I'm litigating this case on my own, meaning at trial, at least at the defamation trial, I'm defending myself. It's called pro se.
Right.
Right. And if you put pro se together, it's pros, It is what it is. Pro se, and some people would say that, someone that represents himself, particularly at trial. Have you ever done a trial? No, but it's something I can learn. And I know his case more than anyone. And I'm going to be a lot more aggressive than my attorney. He's nice. But he said to me early on, he said, "John, I don't dunk on other attorneys."
Yeah, that's no good.
Well, you need to be able to dunk. You need to, like Shaq, pull the net down on him.
Yeah.
Yep. So, but the other thing is, I noticed you're in really good shape, and I'm straight. I can say that. And in the last 2.5 years, I've lost 50 pounds, 40 pounds. So if you go to a doctor and the doctor says you need to eat better and take your rosuvastatin, and not smoke and exercise, does that mean you're practicing medicine without a license if you comply?
No.
So someone that represents himself as a fool for a client, eating right, eating healthy, it's not like you're practicing medicine. So defending yourself in court against a bunch of attorneys, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just, I would call Chris Marcella that's just sloppy. I don't know what you call it to say that someone, you're basically putting your law license on the line saying, yeah, I observed the decedent, Mr. Smith, initial every page. Some people have said that, would an attorney really go along and forward,
for money?
Right.
For money?
Would he look the other way?
And not just that, being an attorney is like a license to steal, because the truth is that if I were to go along with it, like, let's say you say, okay, for a bribe. Well, they can legally bribe you, because all they have to do is say, I charge $400,000 for my fee. And since you get to pick whatever fee you want, your client can go, okay, knowing, but with that fee, I'm telling you right now, it's going to go through. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. The truth is, I could have done this for $1,500 to $2,500. That's what a normal, but I'm going to charge you $400,000 because we're going to make sure this works out.
And look, I am really lucky. My attorney's name is Chris DaCosta. He's out of Fort Myers. And Chris, he's a good man. He may not dunk on other lawyers, but nor does he charge for every email and every phone. He is very honorable that way. But my main reason for doing that is it's my feeling and belief that Kenny Kemp and all Mom's attorneys, all they did was do what I'm told most attorneys do, is just delay everything to squeeze me. And it worked. And as a result of this, I'm in debt, I don't know, probably $200,000 to a bank. And I was recently declared indigent, and I don't have any more money to pay my attorney. So in the face of walking away, I'm not going to walk away. Here would be the greatest solution yet. There's two primary cases. And if someone wants to see me, John Smith, a non-litigator, which by the way, tell me if you think this would be funny. In my remarks to the both cases, there's a jury. Right. And I view the jury as my ultimate audience.
Right.
It's not going to be a judge, because the judge would rule against me.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a big family.
Yeah.
Right.
It is.
Right. So, but with the jury, you have to be able to speak and relate to their. So, you think it'd be funny if I said, by the way, my name is John Smith. I'm the son of financial fraud victim John D. Smith Sr. And I'm really here on behalf of my dad. But, I did want to disclose to you that this is my first case, but my first trial that I'm trying. But I'm in good company because my mom's attorney, Kenny Kemp, this is his first case too. Would that be funny?
Right.
Yeah,
he's never tried a case?
Well, he's maybe have tried some. I think that would be bad, because then I'm conveying that I'm an attorney when I'm not. I need to tell him right away, look, I'm an amateur against a whole bunch of professionals with deep pockets and the ability to lie without remorse. I'm going to lose. But I would not. First of all, the moment you say the lie and all that stuff, they're going to stop you. They're going to interrupt her. Your Honor, what I'm saying? There's this thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Have you ever heard of something called litigation privilege?
No. You're only allowed to go so far.
Well, and those kind of rules, you get
away with a lot in your opening statement. I understand that. But I'm wondering how much they're going to.
No, I wouldn't go with the joke, because the last thing I want to convey a sense of sincerity.
Yeah. You don't want to make light of it, right?
Et cetera. But the cool thing, so there's two cases. The first case is my lawsuit back in 2018. And I wasn't suing to get a portion of the inheritance.
Right.
Let's just be factual to your viewers. There is no inheritance. The inheritance would have been had my father's trust been followed. But all that's out there that the world really knows about is the trust that has the signature on it 16 days before Dad died. The trust that gave mom everything.
Right.
You know, where dad's like, for 15 years, I'm keeping all this from my wife.
Right.
And when I'm on home hospice,
I don't know that she's keeping it from her. He's just saying that my will, or, you know, what my
trust.
goal is. Well, my goal is that it be dispersed. He's not saying she gets nothing. He's saying I want my assets dispersed in the following manner. I want my kids to get half. I want you to get half. Like, he's not saying you're saying keep it from her. He's saying this is for 15 years, or you know, this has been my, you know, this has been what I want to happen. And even when he was sick and knew he was sick and got found, said, hey, you've got cancer. Like, he had plenty of time to make those changes before he was.
and he didn't.
He was mentally in a place where he didn't know whether he was in bed. He didn't know who people are. He didn't know exactly what's going on around him. And then he has an attorney swoop in with your mother and says, hey, we need you to sign this. And who knows what he was signing? Who knows what they told him?
I guarantee it was something like, it was trickery. Like Smitty, his nickname was Smitty. The doctor needs you to sign some medical papers.
Right.
It was some kind of trickery involved.
And then the fact that they're not, it's not, every page isn't initialed. The reason pages are initialed, right, is because, and there's actually a movie with Ben Affleck in it, or Affleck. I forget how you say his name. What's his name? How do you say his name?
I think you said it right
Affleck,
the first time.
Affleck, where he's an attorney, and the partners in the law firm go to a client who's worth, you know, whatever, billions, and he's on his deathbed, and they say, look, we need to, you know, have you sign some things before you die. And he signs the last page, right? And he initials it. And then they take that last will and testament, or whatever it was, and they
Insert.
they remove some pages, insert what they want it to say, so that as the last sentence carries over to the next page, it actually works out perfectly, right? But he's initialed all the pages. Even then, they were able to manipulate it so that they could change his last, or that document. I don't know if it was a trust or a will, but so that they could alter it in such a way. But that's why you initial every page, to say, hey, the document I'm signing, I'm initialing every single page.
Keep someone from committing forgery.
Right. But when you have nothing initialed, and you have people saying, I saw him initial it. What'd you see him initial? There's no initials. What are you talking about?
And one would think the pride of attorney Chris Marsala, when he learns about this, would go, oh my God, how could I have, you know, oh God, you know.
Well, I think he's probably banking on the judge shrugging it off, going, well, I mean, that happens sometimes. I was an attorney. Those things get overlooked, and shrugging it off, which, listen, you know, judges were attorneys. They know that attorneys fuck up. They want to cover other attorneys in the legal profession. They want to cover them. That's why prosecutors, for instance, prosecutors will get up and mislead judges and lie to judges all the time. And there's never any recourse unless the media is there to throw such a light on it that it makes the judge look horrible or the process look horrible. That's the only time I've ever seen a judge or the legal profession kind of, you know, monitor themselves or you know, basically come in and say, okay, we're going to make an example of it. We're going to go ahead and say something about this so that it doesn't look like it happens all the time, because the truth is, we all know it fucking happens all the time. But in this particular case, we're going to have the judge yell and scream and make a big fuss about it. And we may even have this guy get sanctioned by the bar. We won't make him lose his licensing. That's just too much. Or maybe he loses his license for a year. Listen, in Tampa, there was a lawyer, Kevin, oh God, what was his name? Kuntz or something like that. I think his last name was Kuntz. He was a U.S. attorney in Tampa. He literally doctored up transcripts.
I think he's in
one of my stories. One of my stories. He doctors up transcripts, reads the transcripts to a jury, gets the jury to indict two people who lost their child, says he's going to put them on trial. The only way, they were the Goldsbergs or something like that. The only way they were able to get it thrown out was they begged for 6 months to a year. They begged the judge, we're begging you to listen to the tapes that he says these are the transcripts, because there's no way we said this. The judge finally listens to the tapes because there was so much media attention on it. The judge read the lawyer the riot act. Then the U.S. attorney above him said, you're either going to quit or you're going to have to go work in the civil department. Like, you can't work criminal cases anymore. You're too dangerous. Like, so you can do civil litigation. So he quits. And a year later, they appoint him as a U.S. attorney in another district. So we're going to fire you. We're going to make you quit. But don't worry. A year from now, we'll hire you. And they hired him as a supervisor. So, because let's face it, if Kuntz wanted to throw a fuss, Kuntz could say, what are you talking about, bro? This happens all the time. We do this kind of stuff all the time. Like, he could have made it look bad. Instead, they said, look, you understand the position we're in. You go ahead and quit. We'll hire you again in a year. We'll give you a raise.
Like a backdoor deal.
Right. So, because there's no way to say, hey, you were fired from the U.S. attorney's office and hired by another U.S. attorney's office still in Florida, just in a separate district. There's no way to say that that's acceptable in any way. But nobody thought that anybody would ever catch that. And they didn't. My point is, these things happen. And even when they admonish themselves, even when they govern themselves, they still take care of themselves. They never just cut someone's throat and you think, oh, that guy's working at Tire Kingdom now. He's a manager at Tire Kingdom, or he's working at McDonald's. Like, that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening at all. So I'm sorry. So I went off on a tangent. Yeah. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. So my whole thing is, he's banking on, I'll get in front of the judge. Your Honor, it's a mistake. The judge will be like, God, that happens sometimes. I'm not going to hold him responsible for that. We're not going to address that. I'll tell the jury, this is what happens sometimes. Don't even focus on that. And they're going to, no offense, they're probably just going to run over you.
No, look, I'm expecting to lose. But you remember Rocky?
Yeah.
Right. What was Rocky's goal? It was, and there's a song named after it, his goal was to go the distance.
Right.
All he cared about was lasting 15 rounds, going the distance. He knew there was no chance of him winning.
Yeah.
And he won in the end, right? Ultimately, he
loses in the end.
In Rocky 2, he beats about.
I was going to say.
Sorry, it's only been 76.
It's a great movie, though.
It is.
Listen, in my opinion, he still won. He still did, like you say, he did go the distance. And anybody who watched that, he won. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, the fact is that Apollo Creed should have crushed him. Apollo Creed should have been humiliated that this complete underdog, even went 15 rounds with him.
And what happened was Sylvester Stallone, he wrote the movie and he was really successful selling it, but they wanted someone else.
Yeah, they didn't want him.
And he fought for him.
Yeah.
And he took less money.
Yeah. At one point, I don't know if you know this, at one point they started by giving him like, we'll give you $50,000 for the script. No. He said, okay, great, $50,000 for the script, but I star as Rocky. No. Goes to, another studio. They said, we love it. It ends up being a bidding war. He gets it up to like $250,000, $300,000. And this is a time when Sylvester Stallone said, I'm bouncing checks. Like, I can't pay my rent. Like, he literally sold his dog. Do you remember if you listen to the story, that he had a dog. He couldn't afford to feed his dog. He sold his dog. And finally, he came back and somebody said, we'll let you star in it, but we'll only pay you like, and I don't know what the amount was.
I think it was $500,000. It was ridiculous.
Are you saying they got it up to $500,000?
No. The budget for the movie was $500,000.
Oh, okay. No, but they said, but to him, they were like, but we're not paying you a couple $100,000 for the script. We'll pay you like $30,000.
He bet on himself.
Yeah. And he said, but I get to star in it. And they were like, okay, you can star in it, but we're not paying you the $200,000. We'll pay you this much. And they gave him next to no budget to do the whole movie. And it was Rocky. It's one of the most successful movies of all time. Turned into a whole series. There's like 6 or 7 of them now.
So my vision with the book is I want to give it away. And I believe, and I repeat myself, and there's a fair amount of humor in
a little sarcasm, a little bit.
Maybe a little bit, but there's also a lot of truth. Although I say with Nana Kemp, Kenny Kemp's grandmother, my grandson tells the truth,
right?
Which is what a little old lady would sound like if she didn't have her teeth in,
right?
Yeah. Little nuances, stuff like that. Is that bad? I mean, if it's truth, if it's funny, but it's truthful, am I mocking old women to say that a lot of them don't have dentures, and when they don't have dentures, they say truth as,
I don't know.
Look, I was missing my front tooth. I bit into a piece of candy about a year ago, and the tooth broke.
Oh, man.
So I had to get an implant. And, it's hard to swear without a front tooth. It's like, F you. It's hard to get that F sound. Your tongue touched your teeth, all these things you learn. So my goal with the book is I wrote it to teach people the lessons that I learned, and also to share my family with the world, because I would love it if, just to have a feature article written about it to show that this happens to a lot of people. And the subtlety, what my mother did was she just waited until my father was vulnerable and then took advantage of him. And she plays on, oh, she's just a sweet old woman. Like, tell me if this makes any sense. This is her testimony at a hearing. Dad had $1.5 million in life insurance with Mass Mutual and John Hancock. And 4 months after he died, these life insurance checks came payable. So Mass Mutual wrote a $1.5 million check to the John D. Smith Trust. John Hancock wrote a $40,000 check to the John D. Smith Trust. Now, this is Mother's testimony. I took these checks into my bank, Fifth Third Bank, and she sounds just like this. I mean, I'm not mocking. She's she's 82 now. She speaks kind of haltingly.
Right.
It takes her a day to get out an hour's worth of conversation. I took these into the bank, and there wasn't an account opened in the name of the John D. Smith Trust, which was a problem. So the bank opened an account in the name of my trust, and they deposited the $1.5 million into my trust. I now realize 9 years later that it was a mistake, and if the court orders me to give this money back, I will do so. You mean you didn't realize it was a mistake next day?
And why does the court have to order you to?
Duh, right? And then, but the idea that there's $1.5 million checks made payable to Matthew Cox.
Right.
And I take him into SunTrust or Bank of America, and they go, "Are you Matt Cox?" And I'm like, "No." Oh, but Matt Cox doesn't have an account here. Okay, we'll put him in your account. It's illegal.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And yet, this is conveyed to a magistrate. Her name is Kim Bocelli. I mentioned her in the book, Lee County, and she goes, Mrs. Smith testified credibly that she had made a mistake in depositing this into the wrong account. Now, look, banks don't make mistakes like that. Mother goes in and she has some con story, etc. She swindled her bank or played the little old lady. Is it possible that a bank could deposit a check made payable to you in my account? I don't think so.
No.
There's no way in hell it happened.
No, I mean, if it was a mistake on their part, but they would have to pay it back. They would have to correct it.
And why would you need?
I can't imagine somebody would even do that. That doesn't even make sense.
But this is what I'm up against. So the magistrate, Kim Bocelli, hears this. If you or I wake up and say Bank of America, my bank, puts $1.5 million in my account, right? A mistake, right? But let's say I keep it. They call that felony theft.
Right.
Right? It's not like, oh, well, I'm $1.5 million richer, right? A mistake is what happens, but when you keep it, it's a felony, right? And that's what I'm up against in these judges. I mean, the greatest thing is the main judge. Her name is Elaine Laboda.
Right.
And Miss Laboda, if you're listening, I admire you. She's a hard ass. Dad would love her. She's so accurate with her rulings. But Kim Bocelli, she's a magistrate. Magistrates handle stuff that judges are too busy to do. So I have the magistrate ruling where she says, Mrs. Smith testified credibly. Oh my God, I had to throw up in my mouth. I'm listening to this. I'm like, she's $1.5 million checks made payable to Dad's trust. And how dare she put it in her own account? Oh, and she just realized it's a mistake 9 years later. Look, the reason it's not a mistake is she intended that. She's had all this benefit of that $1.5 million. It's not a mistake. When you steal, but it's just like, oh, no, I didn't shoot him. The gun went off.
Yeah.
It's bullshit. People tend to lie about stuff.
Alec Baldwin. Because guns are constantly going off.
Yeah, they're constantly going off.
I know police officers are constantly getting themselves shot in the thigh because they're like, I was walking down the street with my gun and that fucking thing just went off. They're super dangerous. I know when I used to have a concealed weapons permit, and we used to make sure that when we had a gun in the side drawer, that we always faced it towards the wall, because sometimes in the middle of the night it would just go off. So the main thing, I don't know how much time we have left, but what I wanted to walk you and your viewers through, in the video and the book, I accused the heck out of my mother and my sisters of committing tax evasion. Right.
I don't say one word about my mother's 10 attorneys. I don't say that they participated in tax evasion. I don't say they're complicit with tax evasion. I do, in some ways, I want the viewer to smile along with me. So there's some kind of funny stuff, but there's also some things that don't make any sense. When I talk about my mother's attorneys in the video and the book, Family Fraud, what I do is to say, I think my mother's greatest mistake was she's articulating to the IRS that Dad's estate was $8 million when she's sitting on $30 million all along.
Right. Also, so you believe it was valued at $30 million because your mother told you it was,
and also based on her spending.
Okay. So tell me the first thing that you said one time she had told you.
Oh, so this was in like April of 2018. At the time, she lived in my father's condo, where he died, in the living room, of course, or in his bedroom. And we were sitting there, and this was before I learned that Florida law says that beneficiaries are entitled to this info. And I was like, Mom, how much was Dad's estate? And she wouldn't say. And my sister Jenny was there. Jenny's kind of like Mother's financial advisor. Jenny hasn't worked in 10 years. All my sisters are on the cover, and life has not been good to them, at least two of them. So my sister Jenny, it's not her fault. It's not her fault. Well, you're laughing.
What?
All right, so I don't know how much she weighs, but she's like 5'2". She has a pacemaker, and she'll tell anyone that listens that she has fibromyalgia, which apparently is some syndrome that requires her to eat unhealthy and not exercise, especially when she has a pacemaker. And so she has to, and sleep in and not work. But she has this syndrome. All this stolen money, 2 of my sisters, it's not helping. Because Jenny, look, in the last 2.5 years, on my own volition, because I was 298 pounds, and I couldn't believe how undisciplined I was. That I allow. What's the most you ever weighed in your life?
Probably. I mean, the most I ever, probably about 205 pounds, but specifically I was like 19 or 20 years old and working out and trying to weigh 205, but like I weighed what I wanted to weigh.
What do you weigh now?
Me now, I weigh like 180. I'd like to get down to 170. I'd like to lose like 10 to 15. I say 15 pounds, but I don't.
Get up.
Let's say 10.
Testosterone, you lose the weight.
I know. I don't want to do that. So it's probably going to be. But I'd say, let me put it this way: when I walked out of prison, I weighed 150.
Wow.
Right. So, and I knew I was going to gain weight because it's easy to lose weight in prison. And all I did was walk, and I knew I was going to get out and I was going to be able to work out with weights and I was going to be able to eat better. So by the time I left the halfway house, I was probably 160, 165. And it's only because I took the testosterone, I've shot up to 180. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but
But you've also made gains in lifting weights. You can lift more.
Yeah, I would never let my weight get away from me. Not only because obviously I don't like the way I look and I feel super uncomfortable. If I get up around 185, 190, I feel uncomfortable. But not just that, it's just super unhealthy. Like, there's all kinds of issues with just gaining weight. So when I see people that are super heavy, I always do think they're just undisciplined.
By the way, does lifting weights, is it a narcoleptic? Does it put you to sleep at night?
Oh, yeah, you feel better.
But you're so tired.
Yeah.
Like when I run 2.5 miles a couple times a week at night.
Yeah, you're out.
I'm out.
Great.
Right.
It's great. And it's not that I'm walking around tired. Your body just needs that time to sleep. But I was going to say, I always love people that are super overweight that will say, that, well, I have a thyroid issue, I have this issue, I have that, or people that say, well, you can't just starve yourself and lose weight. And I always think of people in concentration camps, and I think, well, there was never some fat person who was like, wow, well, everybody else weighs 100 pounds, and there's this one person that weighs 300 pounds, and they say, oh, that person must have a thyroid problem. Like, I mean, if you cut back on your calories, you're gonna lose weight. That's just the way it is. There's no.
Everything improves when you lose weight.
You feel, of course, yeah. The thinner I am, the better. Now, granted, I don't get the enjoyment of eating a cheeseburger, which does suck. I would love a cheeseburger, but yeah, I hear you. Yeah, yeah. Your sister clearly doesn't have that issue.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing, in this whole ordeal. So
this is a horrible conversation, by the way. I know exactly how horrible this sounds, but it's fine. Whatever. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, but here's the thing about my sisters. So back about 5 years ago, my mother creates a company called Smitty's Footprints. It's based in Lee County. Dad's nickname was Smitty. And I think, again, I haven't had a conversation with my mother in 5 years, my sisters, in about that time. I have lost when Dad died, and really my lawsuit is about standing up for Dad. And my outrage is, how dare someone take advantage of a vulnerable person? And anyone that is curious, I'm expecting to lose, but if I won, ultimately what I would love to see happen is like that scene in Ghost when Oda Mae, with Patrick Swayze's help, when they steal back the evil money, and then they're walking along and Patrick Swayze's like, no, I want you to write it over. And she's like, it's $2 million. You want me to give it away to it, And then,
and he's like, it's dirty money.
It's dirty money. And she won't she won't let go of it, right? So ultimately, I think the greatest justice would be for the court to say, yes, this was a terrible, awful, as they say in the movie The Help. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible, awful that happened. And all the money's rounded up. all these homes my sisters are living in rent-free that mother bought with this stolen money are sold. Oh, my sisters might have to get jobs. Oh, wow. Be like all of us. And all of this money is donated to a charity. That to me would be the ultimate justice. Because ultimately, like 5 years ago, my mother creates this company called Smitty's Footprints. It's in Lee County. And then she starts buying all these homes for cash, way more cash than is in the $8 million estate.
Right.
And then it was back when I was talking with my sisters, I happened to notice a big discrepancy in the articles of incorporation. You know, anyone can look. You go to sunbiz.org,
right. Department
of Corporations, and they have the articles of incorporation. Smitty's Footprints. There's 1,000 shares. And Footprints, I believe, is an ode to the Jesus footprints in the sand. You know, originally there were two pairs, and it was me and Jesus walking along.
Carry,
And then, Jesus, you forsake me. No. That was me carrying you. I think it's that, but no one talks to me. Smitty's Footprints down in Lee County. So you look at the articles of incorporation back in 2017, 1,000 shares, 950 shares owned by mother, 50 shares owned by my sister Jenny. Done everything right. Doesn't work, you know, oh, how dare my brother sue you? That's mother's narcissism in my mind. She names a company after dad, and then dad was generous. Why wouldn't she go like, Jenny, it's all yours? Or Jenny, 50-50. My sisters didn't know that mother had set the company up like this. And I was like, well, you need to do something. You need to tell mom, fuck you. You need to sign your share over, because Jenny's kind of, and I say this with full love, she's kind of a weaker person. You know, life has victimized her, etc. But she's someone that struggles with self-esteem and feelings of self-worth. And her own mother creates a company with her and then throws her under the bus and doesn't treat her equal. And I mention this to my sisters, the other 3 sisters, and they do absolutely nothing. This is the family. And to me, this is an outrage. Like, okay, if you call it Fran's Footprints, well, Fran's a narcissist, of course. 95% mom, 5% Jenny. But dad was generous. Name it after dad, and then it's just awful behavior. So
So
let me walk you through the front.
I was going to say, because it's the discrepancy between telling the IRS $8 million, but actually having spending roughly $30 million. Like, how's that possible?
Correct.
I'm pretty good with math.
Okay. So first, her whole plot, there's 2 things afoot here. There's the IRS, there's the IRS discrepancy of starting with 30 million and tell them 8 million. And by the way, how did she do it? How many accountants do you think she has? One?
How many accountants do you need?
She has 3. So she has one accountant. It's this company called Markham, Norton, blah, blah. I can't read upside down.
Yeah.
They're in Fort Myers.
Markham, Norton, Misteller, Wright, and Company.
Right. Okay. Randall Wright is the main accountant. So that accountant does my dad's trust tax return. That's the only thing they do. Then another accountant does dad's personal 1040, and that accountant's name, Stephen Bretholtz of Fort Myers. But wait, there's more. And then the third accountant does dad's 706 estate tax return, Kim Probe. Now, why do you think mother had 3 separate accountants?
Well, because if one accountant would have all the information, they would all be the same. You can go to one accountant and I can tell you the estate's worth $8 million because this house is worth $2 million. This one's worth $1 million. This is worth $200,000. There's this much in this account. You can tell them that. And then they say, okay, so it's $8 million. Yes, it's $8 million. Then for the purposes of, let's say, depreciation, you could go to another accountant and say, it's worth $20 million and we're depreciating this and we're doing that. Well, that's in conflict. You're giving conflictory information to each accountant. If it was one accountant, he would say, well, wait a second.
What's going on
You
here?
said this last time.
Yeah, what's going on here?
I can't do that. That would be unethical. I'll get in trouble for saying 8 million here, 12 million, 20 million here, and 2 million here. That's not right. I have to be consistent. But if you go to 3 different ones, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing.
That's exactly my suspicion. And again, this is not something that I believe she's had this conversation with Kenny Kemp. I believe she's paid Kenny Kemp. That's her main attorney. And again, this attorney went from $150,000 townhome prior to knowing Mom to $1.5 million mansion. He bought and this is just a crazy thing.
He did what?
He lived in a $150,000 townhome in 2014.
Prior to
knowing Mother. Right. Within 3 months of knowing Mother. And obviously, ka-ching, right?
Right.
Because I believe he knows the real estate is $30 million.
Right. So within that time, he went from $150,000 condo to
he bought a house for $1.4 million, and he put $400,000 cash on it. Now, how would I know that? Well, I'm good at research.
Yeah.
So you go to the
public records. Yeah. It's
right. You see the mortgage for $900,000. You see the deed for $1.3. You look for any other mortgages. There are none. The only answer is
he put down cash.
He put down $400,000 cash.
Right.
Now, how would someone that lives in a $150,000 home for 14 years suddenly have $400,000 cash?
Well, he's not. He. That's a lot of $8 signatures. A lot of notaries.
No, this is different.
It's a lot.
This
different
is
attorney.
Different
attorney.
Chris Marsala only did the forged trust.
Okay.
Attorney Kenny Kemp is.
I'm sure he's a notary too.
Maybe
a lot of notary signatures. That's a lot of wills.
Kemp is throughout family fraud book.
Okay.
Kenny Kemp is suing me for defamation because I took 3 of his lies, put them on a T-shirt, and wore them to a deposition facing him. It's my sense of humor. I thought it'd be funny. Like
Did he think it was funny?
He took pictures and then he sued me. So apparently he has no sense of humor. But how do you defame someone with their own lies?
Right.
Defamation.
Well, you can sue anybody for anything.
I know. And this judge believes that my shirt is evidence. So with that in mind, I plan to it's going to be my uniform. Look, if you say something cockamamie stupid and I just put it on a shirt and wear it, I'm defaming you with your own words. It's ridiculous.
Right.
Defamation is I take something that's untrue. Because the defense against defamation is truth. If you said it.
Right. That's the same thing I was saying that with me saying stuff in my book and using real people's names is that my defense to anybody that were to try and sue me is the truth. But I have the truth. I know what the truth is. You said this here. You said this here. You're in this newspaper. You're in this. All of these are true things. So I don't have a problem with it. I've never had a problem. But go ahead.
Right.
The 8 million to the go ahead.
Right. So 3 separate tax returns. The main one is after a year and a half of waiting for it, 14 months. This is my father's 706. And this version is not redacted. You know what redacted means, right?
Yeah, changed.
Well, usually blacked out. They'll usually redact or black out a social security number so that some fraudster doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. But this is when my mom says, Dad's estate was only $8 million. What refutes it is her spending.
Right.
So that's what I want to go through with you right now. Right. So the number one question someone will say, and this is what I have to prove at trial, is they're saying that I've defamed attorney Kenny Kemp by wearing a shirt and filming a video showing what I believe to be the truth. They falsely said that I've, in the video, said that Kenny Kemp and my mother's other attorneys aided her in the tax evasion or complicit. I had to go back and watch it again, and I found 2 spots where on the screen I flash Mrs. Smith and her 4 daughters committed tax evasion. Like, it's not there. Which is why they filed their stupid little defamation suit against me. It wasn't for the truth. It was just to cause me to be indigent
Right.
and spend a whole bunch of money. But this is the argument that I would make if I were in front of a jury. How do I know that mother's estate or, dad's estate was greater than $8 million?
Well, first of all, why would your mother tell the IRS it was worth $8 million?
All right, think about this. Let's say when someone doesn't do something that they should, would you agree they don't do something trying to avoid some perceived negative consequence?
Right.
Okay. So the reason why you, going back to your story, the reason why you absconded from Tampa or went on the run was a negative consequence. I'm going to get arrested and thrown in jail. Right. So
or why would you go do this and use a different identity? Right. Because if it's found out, I don't want it leading back to me. Right. So she tells the IRS $8 million.
Right. So let's say I think, my mother, my whole family is really good at math, myself included. And so I think mother did what we call a pro forma. Okay, if I tell the IRS it's $30 million, they're gonna want estate taxes of $8 million of my fucking money. That's how mom thinks, right? Okay, all right. No, I'm not gonna tell them it's $30 million. Okay, if I tell them it's $20 million, the estate tax are gonna be $4 million of my fucking money. No way, I'm not gonna tell them $20 million. Right. Oh, but if I tell them $8 million, that's still millions, right?
Yeah.
And there's no estate taxes.
It's a little over $2 million she has to pay then, right?
No, she didn't have to pay any estate taxes.
Okay.
So why would you deliberately underreport to the IRS? It's to avoid paying taxes, which is what I say in the video.
Okay.
Now, here's a little side note about the IRS. Everyone's afraid of the IRS.
Right.
If you are let's say you defraud the IRS, $22 million, and you keep it under wraps for long enough, like in my case, 5 or 6 years, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
The IRS, I met with a IRS special agent. They call it IRS CI, criminal investigation. Right. So the people that investigate tax fraud, but they have these handcuffs, which are the statute of limitations,
yes.
Right? What, everyone knows the Bernie Madoff story. It wasn't the IRS that investigated and prosecuted him. It was the SEC,
right? Securities
Exchange Commission. So the IRS, think of a wimpy country like, in World War II, what was it? Switzerland? Yeah. That's the IRS. Anyone listening, you work at the IRS, you'll agree with me. If you find out fraud and it's past the 6-year statute of limitations, the fraudster gets away with it.
Yeah.
Right? So I didn't learn about this fraud until 2018, 2019. It's, and the IRS is, have you ever owed money to the IRS?
No.
Couple of grand?
Well, yes, I have. Yeah.
Right?
Yes, I have.
Couple of grand?
Yeah.
I believe, and I write in the book, there's 2 IRS offices. There's the IRS that governs the middle class and the poor, you or I. Right. And those are the ones, you owe us $3,000. We're going to levy your bank accounts. We're going to, your third child, etc. And then there's the IRS that governs the rich. And that's the IRS that goes, your mother is 80 years old. Do you really think we're going to handcuff an 80-year-old? Well, wouldn't you levy on me if I owe the IRS when I owe a couple grand? Why is it any different? There's 2 IRS offices. Right. So what I've heard from, and they have a whistleblower office.
Right.
A whistleblower office is kind of like a dead P.O. box, meaning they don't check the mail very often. You send in your whistleblower complaint and they go, another complaint. You can read horror stories about the whistleblower program. What's the point of having laws if they don't enforce them?
Right.
Yeah. So the IRS is...
so she had no fear of telling the IRS that it's $8 million.
I've heard people say, John, it's crazy you wrote a book called Family Fraud. It's crazy. You're like staking yourself out there saying, levying all these accusations. And I would submit to anyone, no, I think craziness is telling the IRS the estate's $8 million when it's 30.
Right.
That's crazy. So the way that, and I show in the book, and I also articulate in the video, by the way, was shot in 2021. And the video really was kind of a fuck you to my mother and her attorneys, who by this point in 2021, it cost me like $100,000. So I sent it to, as I recall, I sent it to every IRS criminal investigation office in the US. There's like 56 of them. And it was really like a video affidavit to law enforcement. That's why I shot it. But I didn't know a lot of the stuff in it. I didn't know about the forgery on Dad's trust. I didn't know by 2021, we were probably only to like 40 of Kenny Kemp's lies. There've been maybe another 24 since. So the book came out last year. And the thing is, not a lot of people know about family fraud, but everyone deals with family fraud, which is why I want to give the book away for free. And you can do that. Any viewer here can read. And there's the ebook has a bunch of clickable links in it. There's a whole bunch. My main goal is to tell people what happened to me and teach what I learned so they can protect their family.
Right.
All right. But now going through the numbers, how do I know, mother says it's 30 million. How do I know?
She says it's 8 million to the IRS.
Well, she says it's 8 million to the IRS, but I know that it just can't be accurate. The second page of this document, and I don't know, is there a file there called Certificate of Trust? Yeah, that's the Excel. No. All right, it's not there. This is when mother purchased one of her properties for cash.
Okay.
She had to provide her trust. And now, mind you, this is a picture of the family. It's maybe about 10 days before Dad died. We're all at the Polynesian village in a room. Dad's, he's like out of it. Like, I see castles. And it was just a bunch of gibberish. And we were like, oh, do you see heaven? But it was just really meaningful time with Dad. But so that's me. That's mother. That's my younger sister, Karen. That's Jenny. That's my younger sister, Christy. I'm sorry. That's my youngest sister, Casey. It's hard to look this upside down. And this is Kristin. So like Kristin and Jenny are kind of underemployed, unemployed. Karen, Casey works at Microsoft. Karen married well. Karen and Casey don't work. But the ultimate, there's two crimes, the crime against the IRS and the ultimate crime here is what my dad saw his family as a pie with 7 slices. Mom, dad, 5 kids. Mom sees the pie. She doesn't have a son. So when she bought one of her homes, she had to do a certificate of trust. And so she had to provide her trust. So this is the second page of her trust. And then there's 4 other boring pages. But she only lists her successor trustees, my sister Jennifer, my sister Kristin, my sister Karen, my sister Casey.
Right.
This is when you think about American greed, this was her whole goal. And this happened months before my lawsuit back in 2018. So all this is mother in her mind is she don't have a son.
Right.
And all this is I'm going to steal this money from my husband and I'm going to redistribute it to my 4 girls. I don't have a son.
Okay.
Right. And if I were in my 20s, I'm 55 now, this would be really hurtful. I mean, like to be disinherited by your mother. Why? Over greed. And like, if she's going to share it, do something good with it. Help the poor. But like 2 of my sisters to enable my sister Christy to live in a $600,000 home, that's not in Dad's values. That's crazy. Do something good with this money. And I get it. At this point, I don't need the money. I can support myself. I might be nicer if I had a,
$600,000 house.
Using forgeries and bogus identities, Matthew B. Cox, one of the most ingenious con men in history, built America's biggest banks out of millions. Despite numerous encounters with bank security, state, and federal authorities, Cox narrowly, and quite luckily, avoided capture for years. Eventually, he topped the U.S. Secret Service's most wanted list and led the U.S. Marshals, FBI, and Secret Service on a 3-year chase, while jet-setting around the world with his attractive female accomplices. Cox has been declared one of the most prolific mortgage fraud con artists of all time by CNBC's American Greed. Bloomberg Businessweek called him the mortgage industry's worst nightmare, while Dateline NBC described Cox as a gifted forger and silver-tongued liar. Playboy magazine proclaimed his scam was real estate fraud, and he was the best. Shark in the Housing Pool is Cox's exhilarating first-person account of his stranger-than-fiction story. Available now on Amazon and Audible.
Back to, we got $8 million.
Yep.
How are you getting to $30 million?
Okay.
She says, I have $8 million
Okay.
to the IRS.
Yes. All right. So her spending. So I have to refer to the 706. Is the 706 one of those files on the master file? I don't think it is because it has so much. It has so much public info. I can email this to you, but I'd rather not. I'd rather just kind of walk you through it so you can see it. All right. So we start with $8 million.
Right.
Right. Then on page 2 of the 706, $1.5 million was paid to my father's trust.
Right.
Right. Then on page 9 of the 706, the page numbers are at the bottom. Page 9. Page 9, there's $738,000. If you add this one, these three add up to $738,000.
Right. So roughly almost 2.3 million.
Correct. So if you make these, if you start with $8 million and you have a calculator and Kellogg's Common Sense here, and you subtract some basic expenses, real estate.
There's another $300,000. So now we're at 2.6 million to 2.7 million.
Correct. So if you subtract all that from what you started with, you're now at the net estate of Dad of call it 5.5 million.
Right.
Okay. So now
that's what she's got in the bank account.
Yes. Before this. So this is testimony she made last April. In a hearing, she's under oath, and she's testifying that since Dad died, she's been spending $250,000 a year on living expenses. Now, mind you, the home's paid for,
right?
But you can't argue with testimony under oath. So she's for the last 10 years, she spent $250,000 a year on living expenses, and this is the source document. I didn't think I should bring it. So that's $2.5 million.
Okay.
In the same testimony, she said she's donated $200,000 a year to charity.
Nice. 2 million's gone.
2 million. Now think about this.
Now she's at 4.5. She's down to $1 million.
Right. Now think of this. If all you had was 5.5 million.
Right.
Right.
Would you piss away?
Would you donate 2 million or 40% all the money you had in the world to charity?
No, but I'm not a charitable person. I wouldn't donate anything to charity. I'm just that guy.
Right. No, but if you had 30 million and you subtract whatever,
right,
and you got 25 million, would you give?
They're probably getting nothing.
They actually are. I verified. All right. So
no, I'm saying me.
Yeah, you.
Yeah, I'm not giving them nothing.
All right.
But,
so now,
but your mom seems to be very generous.
Very generous. So from 2000
with anyone but you.
Well, but wait a sec. From 2013 to 2018, I was told there was a trust for me, and starting in 2015, I could borrow against this trust. These proceeds were loaned to me. I signed, and I know why she did it now. So it was a total of $446,000 that she loaned to me. And now a cynic would say, John, if she loaned you $446,000, you're her least favorite kid, what did she give each of your 4 other sisters? And I'm like, well, it's a hell of a lot more than $446,000.
Right.
If she buys one of them a house and the other a house, but both titles on the houses are in mom's name.
Right.
See, narcissism. So anyways, like you said, living expenses, and she's very charitable, and she loaned me $446,000. So those add up to this.
Right.
You subtract them from now you have $535,000.
Okay.
All right. So now these are other things that are not included, but logical expenses. Trust for my sisters. If she's telling me there's a trust that's going to loan me $446,000. And by the way, that money stopped on October 1st, 2018 when the lawsuit was served. And the reason is that we don't want John to pay his lawyers with this money, which goes back to this money is not yours. If it's yours,
right.
if I want to, snort cocaine with it, if I want to go to Greece, if I want to,
right.
If it's your money, you have the power. So these are reasonable expenses that she would have had, and the biggest thing, Kenny Kemp, she's been with him 10 years. Kenny Kemp, he drives, now he has this $1.5 million mansion, and that wasn't enough. Because remember, he's about the height of a Oompa Loompa, Loompa Doopity Doo.
Right.
Another riddle for you. He's tiny. He's probably two Kenny Kemps make one Matt Cox. He's little. And
but he's got a big car, big truck, big house.
He probably has a big bed, so big he needs like a ladder to the bed, like a little person.
So anyways,
so what we don't know, and what he's been very reticent about sharing, is his legal fees the last 10 years.
Right.
Oh, it's none of my business. Except he knows that when you plug in, let's say there are $2 million in legal fees. Well, there's not enough money in the estate. She spent this and she donated this. Where'd the $2 million come from? That's the whole point I'm making the video, is that if you look at these attorneys, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying.
Attorneys, and you look at their lifestyles. A guy that lives in $1.5 million house, and now he has a $650,000 Nortec 39-foot speedboat behind his in the marina. Who spends $650,000 on a boat? A little guy, right?
So let's okay. So I understand what you're saying,
right.
but so your sisters most likely have trusts.
Yes.
So we're assuming that let's say they're about the same as yours. Let's say
$500,000 apiece times 4. That's
okay.
$2 million.
$2 million. Your mother has 9 rental homes, insured maintenance costs. Do you have calculations for what you believe those are valued at?
Yeah, that's a spreadsheet. Right.
So how much does that come to?
Well, the raw cost of these are the homes she's bought in the last, is $2.2 million.
Yeah, $2.2 million.
Right.
And this is there's no mortgages on these.
They're all cash.
Free and clear.
Free and clear, right. And
so she's now deep in the negative.
Yeah, and how's that I mean, I say in the book, it's like the loaves and fishes of Jesus.
Right.
Jesus had loaves and fishes. All right, and you can pull up the spreadsheet now.
Which one?
That one. It's a miracle. You had $536,000. Okay, if tax evasion is not what's occurring, here's what Kenny Kemp has said. She received money before your father died. Oh, really? Oh, then it would be in Dad's 1040. Huh. But a bequest is not there. There's no paper trail. That's odd.
So we've got legal fees, 9 attorney legal fees. That's not cheap. CPA fees. That's not cheap. Trusts and college funds for 6 grandchildren. That's a lot. Living expenses of $250,000 per. Okay.
per year.
Per year. Yeah. This is the 200,000. This is the original one.
Right.
Okay. So all this comes to.
I estimate it. Well, I say it's probably all of this is another 6 to 10 million.
Okay.
I mean, we know 2 trusts, 4 trusts for my sisters. If it's the same amount as me, that's 2 million.
Right.
Yeah. Another couple of million to our attorneys. See, they won't tell us, my attorney and I, what their legal fees have been the last 10 years because they know where.
It's excessive and it probably makes them look complicit. So it's a total of.
So like these were all the loans. I keep really good records, but they total up to be $446,000. So this is my ultimate spreadsheet. Is if she started with $536,000 and she bought all these homes, taxes. What I don't have a handle on is like homeowner association and are they quarterly or annually? But anyways, she spent at least 2.8 million, probably like 3 million, and she only would have had 536,000. And again, this doesn't include the trust. So what do you call that? If you only got 8 million, you can't spend 11.
Right.
Right. And this is ultimately what's so silly about the pansies at the IRS. Is no one cares. Oh, it's been 6 years ago. Oh, it's been.
Well, there's nothing they can do, right? Like the statute of limitations is up. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, but now a creative person. So I want to show you this. Let's see. Hold this up to the camera there. Hold it so they can see the address. Let's see. I was thinking the camera right behind you.
Okay, that's you.
Yeah. So this is a letter. This is one of the federal agencies I complained about.
Okay.
Right. So anyone out there, if you Google the Center for Tax Fraud Reporting, they're up in DC somewhere. And so I Googled them and it takes you right to a page with the IRS, Department of Justice, etc. So I send a complaint letter to them.
Right.
And then sometime in like January of last year, they sent me this packet. And I don't want to bore you with most of the content, but in the packet, they have this, why you should care about IRS tax fraud. But they sent me in a cover letter, they sent me a whole bunch of documents. Oh, and one of them is this. So go ahead and read that over.
Okay.
And it looks to be a copy of a 1099 from Fidelity and Charles Schwab. And it looks to be my mother's holdings as of, I don't know, June or July of 2021.
Right. 3.9 million down to 11. Oh, then we've got the ending value, but then we've got total investments in cash position almost 11.5 million.
Right. And so I assume that this federal agency, the Center for Tax Fraud Reporting, obviously a federal agency like this would have access to databases and stuff like this. But what's interesting about this, this thing was called Exhibit 14. So back almost 2 years ago, my mom's attorney, Kenny Kemp, he had accused me of committing fraud on the court. He had all these false allegations. Ultimately, Judge Laboda, my favorite judge, because she's a hard ass.
Right.
I think she would agree with that. She doesn't suffer fools. Ultimately, she found that Attorney Kemp's allegations were without merit. It took 2 years, but he had so much conviction that we had to have an evidentiary hearing on January 24th of last year. And he provided this affidavit of mother's holdings, wherever it is. You can never find it. Here it is.
Yeah.
Right. So he provided this as evidence, almost to brag. And why would an attorney do that unless it were true? So like he kind of, in my mind, validated The whole point that I make in the book and in the video is if you start with 8 million and you spend 14 million and then you have 11 million left.
Yeah, that's some special math.
Yeah, but then others have said, maybe your mother is a investment genius.
Well, then where's the investments? Then where?
Well, okay, but Kenny Kemp would like you to not see what doesn't exist. Just like for years he said, oh, your father never had a trust. Your father only had one trust, and it was dated August 5th, 2013. And then when on my own I found Dad's trust, oh, that trust was never funded. And then when we found that it was funded with $1.5 million in life insurance, but those checks were never made payable to the John D. Smith Trust. And then when we found that they were made payable to John D. Smith Trust
she just deposited them in the... Right.
She made a mistake. She never meant to deposit them in her own account, and she didn't find out that mistake for 9 years.
Past the statute of limitations for...
Who knows? So like in Kenny Kemp and Mrs. Fran Smith's world, I didn't steal that money. It's not 30 million. It's 8 million. But how have you spent all this money? I got a bequest. Really? Where's the paper trail from the bequest? Well, there is no paper trail. And thus, that's why I think this would make a great documentary, a Netflix. I mean, it's too bad Telly Savalas is dead. Kenny Kemp, Telly Savalas. Now, Telly was much taller, but they got the bald head.
Yeah.
I mean, like, think of a guy that's 5'2" that's bald. I mean, besides, can you flash up? Let me talk about the shirt, by the way, because I've been accused. There we go. Okay, so zoom in on this, and then I think we're almost done. All right, so back in 2021, these are. Can you read those? And that's Kenny Kemp on the left. Not that I have anything against bald guys. It's just bald, dishonest attorneys. So those are 3 lies that he told. So there was a hearing in September 2020, and there's 2 trusts. There's my dad's 1998 trust, which is called the original trust. And then there's the second trust in 2013, the forged trust, that's called the amended trust. And so the judge says, Mr. Kemp, have you given Mr. Smith the original trust? And he goes, Judge, I don't have the original. I don't know where it is. And about 15 minutes go by. She asks the same question. And he goes, Judge, we gave him the original trust.
Gave who the original trust? You.
Yeah. First,
so they handed you they gave you the original.
He testifies. First, he testifies, I don't have it. I don't know where it is. That's on page 29 of this transcript. Then on page 35, she asks the same question. And he goes, Judge, yes, we gave him the original. So when we are having a deposition, that's a fucking lie. We don't have it. How do you give something you don't have? Right. That's one. In the book, I chronicle his...
Let's assume for a second. Sorry, I hate to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Let's assume for a second he gave you the original trust. One, why would you give someone... I'm an attorney. I have the original trust. Let's say you requested a copy. Why would I give you the original? I would never give away the original.
There's 2 contexts to the word original, though. Original versus copy is one context.
Right.
In original versus amended is the context here.
Okay.
All right. So the original trust is the 98 trust, the first trust.
Right.
The amended trust is the second trust. That's original and amended. But original could also refer to the original one that Dad signed versus a copy. Right. So the language here in this hearing was not original and copy. The language was first trust in 98 called the original. Second trust in 2013 called the amended.
Okay.
So the judge is asking about first trust in 98, second trust in 2013.
Okay.
And I agree, it gets confusing.
Right.
The context is everything. But either way, like if Kenny Kemp said, oh no, I was talking about original versus copy, it's still a lie. We don't have the original. I gave the original. Lie.
Right.
Right. And it's in a transcript. Another thing, the second one down says, John D. Smith is not a beneficiary. John D. Smith is not a beneficiary of the 1998 trust. You see that?
Yeah.
All right. And that's sourced in Kenny Kemp's affirmative defenses. And there's many times he says that. And then in an email, the third one, it says, it is without question that John D. Smith is an interested person in the estate. Wait a sec. How could I be an interested person if I'm not a beneficiary?
Right.
That's a lie.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Well, and the document itself shows that you and your sisters were.
yeah. But the whole point of this, the last 5 years, I had to go and find the 1998 trust on my own.
Right.
With no help. Kenny Kemp never gave it to me. They always said, oh, we don't have it. Oh, it's been destroyed. Oh, it's been dissolved.
Right.
And these are all lies that I put into the book. So I thought it would be funny. I'm at a deposition of me, and I know he's going to be sitting across from me. So I just thought it was, kind of funny. And I don't know if you sensed, I'm kind of outraged, and I'm kind of, maybe not vindictive, but what's in the character of someone that has the idea of wearing I call him protest shirt.
Right.
It's my First Amendment protest shirt, sitting across from the very guy that uttered these lies. I just thought, and I took it a step further, although this didn't make it. Kenny Kemp, he's a short guy, but
right.
He also he graduated from the University of Miami. And if you've known anyone that went to UM, their mascot is known as Sebastian. It's an ibis, University of Miami, the Hurricanes.
Okay.
Right. And Kenny Kemp, in his Facebook profiles, he wears this big ibis gold chain, an ibis like a rapper would wear,
right?
Except his is a University of Miami ibis. And to mock him, I bought a cheap ibis and had it under my shirt, and I was hoping I would lean over and it'd come flopping out, but I never. I figured just having it, that was mocking him enough. So I wore this shirt, and then based on this shirt, he filed a suit for defamation. I'm defaming him with his own words. So now pull up the baby. Right? So flash forward to, yes, baby Kenny. And it really kind of looks like him too. I mean, look, they're about the same height. So now, am I defaming him by comparing a 20-inch tall baby to, a 5'1" Oompa Loompa guy?
Maybe
not. But if it looked like him,
but if it walks like a duck, so
last February 4th, there was a deposition in this defamation trial process, and they requested me to bring that shirt that I wore. Well, I didn't know, a shirt in May, they want 9 months later.
Right.
I had pitched the shirt.
Yeah, there's no reason to have the shirt.
Right. Or maybe I had washed it a bunch of times and it just shrunk. And so when they asked for the shirt, I was like, I'll get you the fucking shirt. And so, this is my creative mind. It's a metaphor, right? Hey, Kenny's crying. I defamed him with his own words. So I put the same image on the shirt. And then I had a little bit of entertainment. On my phone, I had rigged up a crying baby.
Right.
You can get a ringtone that's a crying baby,
mm-hmm.
right? And so at a certain point, now Kenny wasn't there. His attorney was there. And his attorney, his name, it's a great name.
What is it?
It's a name of esteem and prestige and money. So his first name is Asher.
Uh-huh.
His middle name is Ellsworth. And his last name, it's phonetically Canipe, like Canipe. So look, I have the world's most common name. Who should I be? I shouldn't be critical of anyone, But to name your kid Asher, and then what do kids call him for short? Like Ash?
Right.
Or Ellsworth. No. Stop, stacking the firewood in tens. Come in. It's time for dinner. Anyway, so Asher is the opposing attorney. And he's like, do you have the shirt? And my attorney's like, my former attorney, yes, I had him bring the shirt. And at that cue, I called the phone. The crying baby alert goes off, right? I reach into my backpack, shut off the phone. Look, when someone pisses you off and takes advantage of your father, this is the way I kind of vent a little bit. They want the shirt. I give them the goddamn. Is that not the shirt?
That is the shirt.
Look,
so you pull the baby out.
Pull the baby out, and he goes, look, if my attorney had a gun and murder was legal, I'd be dead. My old attorney, this guy's a big guy. Because he had promised the guy the shirt.
Yeah.
And I had conveniently not said anything.
Right.
So Asher was like, oh, I'll wait until I tell the judge. Well, at my defamation trial, I am going to present a 2023 version of the baby, because I'd rather they hear it from me. These are all lies.
Right.
And you don't defame someone with their own words. That's kind of crazy. So, anyway,
so why is he? So he's just trying to wear you down and bankrupt you and.
Well, no, it's worked. I'm indigent.
Yeah.
And that's why, since I can't afford to pay my attorney anymore, think of the last person that Kenny Kemp and also my mother would want to be questioned under oath. Me.
Right.
I don't know if you picked up on it. Maybe I'm a little naturally adversarial.
Uh-huh.
Right.
See it.
Yeah. And so, Mr. Marsala, so you visited the client at his home on his deathbed, and you get your notary stamps here, and yet your witness says they initialed every page, and every page is not initialed.
Right.
Yeah, an attorney is going to be outraged that some amateur is questioning them. But I think a jury would be really interested to hear from the victim's son. And so, ultimately, if I'm going to lose in court, I'm going to lose doing my best to honor my father in front of a bunch of strangers.
Right.
And I'll take those odds. I don't think my attorney, he already told me he doesn't dunk on opposing attorneys. And I think there's a link between my mother's attorney's lifestyles and the fees they charge, but there's not enough money in the stated $8 million to be able to afford these attorneys. So either they work for free or the estate was way more than $8 million. If it was way more than $8 million, what does that say about all the attorneys, and what's that say about mother?
Right.
Yeah.
Or she's got she's done amazing things with her investments and then also just not told the IRS about it.
Yeah, she started with $4 million. She didn't spend it, and she invested this $4 million. And in the last 10 years, including a couple years of the worst market ever, she not just doubled, not tripled, not quadrupled, not quintupled. She's 6 times.
Yeah,
that's
in her 70s.
In her 70s with no training. That has as much logic as my father saying,
not disclosed it to anyone.
And there's no paper trail. And the greatest thing about the 706, and I sent this video, by the way, to Kenny Kemp, Chris Marsala, Bruce Green, a bunch of what I would call incompetent accountants, and not one of them sued me. And I have unflattering things. I call, the accountant Kim Probe. So this is her work, right? It's unsigned, this tax return. There are spreadsheets inserted in it. A spreadsheet. Why would someone put a spreadsheet of this? Why not have there in a life insurance policy? There's a certain thing that's a tax form I forget the number. Why not have those? Spreadsheets are kind of ripe for fraud. What's most interesting about 706 is, so there's a spreadsheet on Dad's alleged, handwritten notes in a 706 that you file with the IRS. Sloppy. So there's a spreadsheet purporting to have Dad's, and here we go, Dad's stocks and bonds. Now, before he died, he entrusted to me a number of his Charles Schwab 1099s, and I've done analysis comparing them to this, and none of these are in the Charles Schwab. 90% of Charles Schwab is not shown here. Now, why would someone leave out multi-million dollars from Charles Schwab? Well, why would someone deliberately underreport?
Right. Well, I was going to say too, and your mother's the one providing all this information.
Yeah, like a spreadsheet. Why not have a 1099? Well, a spreadsheet's ripe for fraud. And this is the quality. So just keep in mind, if anyone out there is thinking of fucking over the IRS, God, it's so easy to fuck them over. All you have to do is start with 30 million, tell them 8 million, and hope they don't figure it out for 5 or 6 years.
Well, she's good.
It's
she's good. She knows what she's doing. She's a gangster.
It was just an accident. It's all just an accident.
So what is ultimately the goal? Let's assume that you go to the two lawsuits and you prevail. What would be like the ultimate goal?
Well, all that I can hope to prevail is to recover my attorney's fees.
Right.
In life, if I have my father's longevity, I have 17 good years, right? I would love that some producer documentary says, wow, what a great story. Like a little old lady, like you were the Bonnie and Clyde of mortgage fraud, right? So think of a little old lady that is the mastermind of a crime syndicate that hoodwinked the IRS. Think of all the fun titles. I don't know if there's any kind of famous, grandmas in criminal history that get away with fraud, but I think most people would go like, wow, she fooled a lot of people. But I think the thing that ultimately is her downfall, like a lot of fraudsters, is the spending. The spending, and that's why I went through it briefly, but if you only have 8 million, you only have 8 million, how do you spend more?
Right.
That is something that there is no answer for.
Right.
And that's why like my previous attorney, Scott, he never made a big issue of mother spending. I feel like I could try either case with 5 witnesses and win. Chris Marsala, the attorney that created the amended trust that never was hired by Dad. Can you imagine someone that your family didn't hire shows up at your doorstep and has a new trust that steals all your family money and gives it to a third party? And no one, Judge Laboda, Magistrate Bocelli, no one says, wait a sec. Where was the signed off, letter of representation between Mr. Smith and Attorney Marsala? And no one cares about it.
Right.
Yeah. So, ultimately, if I win, I get really nothing. I get made whole with all the attorney's fees. To me, the ultimate victory would be sharing my story with the world and having, I think that most people in the public, everyone's against me,
right?
And my parents, my mom's side of the family is the Sensky, and guaranteed they're only seeing her side. Not one person, and there's a lot of we go to church every Sunday.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pious people. Yeah. Not one of them.
They're the worst.
Yeah, not one of them has said, "Wait a second, why would Mr. Smith? Why would Smitty change his trust 16 days? That doesn't make any sense." No one has, and that's to me the power of, there's a chapter in there of the because I analyzed the $2 million that she donated to charity. I actually run it down. There's about $1.5 million to Dad's college, John Carroll University. On the phone a couple years ago, as soon as I say, "Oh, this is John Smith, son of John Smitty Smith." "Oh, hey, blah blah blah, nice talk. Yeah, I was just calling to say, how much money have you gotten from, Mom, Mary Frances Smith?" "Oh, well, hold on a sec. Let me blah 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 blah. Oh, it was $1.5 million. Great. Oh, thank you. Can you give me the dates and amounts? I'm just trying to clear up some, I'm trying, the $1.5 million wasn't on the IRS tax return." Call back 3 days later. We don't have it. The same person, by now she's spoken to Mom. "Oh, we don't have anything." And she's really, and I put that in the video in the book, her memory becomes distant. So there's a lot of subterfuge. What I would love, really the only thing I have is my story.
Right.
And the big question is, what do you think, Matt? Do you think people out there, do you think your viewer, do you think we'll get any views? Do you think viewers are going to go, "Oh man, that happened to me too"?
Well, I think it happens a lot. I think, I said, I think it happens a lot more than people realize. There's a house that's in dispute. There's people argue over it. They start changing deeds. They start running up credit cards. They start, the person in control ends up funneling money to themselves, that sort of thing. In my mom's case, my sister handled all the money that was involved in everything. She's been, as far as I can tell, she's been, amazingly,
honorable.
Yeah, very, very, very. Everything's very she's always ready to be like, "Look, here's what this is. Here's what happened. Here's this. So here's what I did with it." More than fair. And it's not like she's charging for it. In her opinion, she's like, "Well, I have the time and I this and that." And she was always, great there with my mother. Handled everything for my mother couldn't have had a better representative. But in a lot of people's cases, I see things, people taking advantage of the situation. And even when I was in prison, I saw guys that were in prison trying to figure out how to get their their mother was sick or their dad was this, and how do I get this and how do I get that? And it was always like, bro, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Or even worse, either they're trying to figure out how to get the house out of their parents' name into their name because it's their inheritance. Like, "Oh yeah, both of your parents are still alive. What are you doing?" Or it's my dad died and I just found out that my sister a month later sold the house. Like, how is that possible? I'm like, "Well, is there a will?" He's like, "No." She's like, "No, there was no will." Like, I even asked when he got sick, like, "Well, what does the will say?" And it's like, "Well, how did they get the house out of your father's name into her name?" Or I had somebody one time where a mother had died and the siblings were trying to sell the house out from underneath another sibling. There's all these different things that happen when a parent dies and there's no clear instructions left. But the problem is that the court, if there's instructions, and it's even if it none of it makes sense, they typically go with the instructions, even though it's so easy to alter the instructions. You know what I mean? It's very easy. And they're like, "Well, we got a signed document. That's it." It's like, wait a second. This doesn't make sense. Look at what just happened. A lot of times they just don't want to look at it. They don't, let's face it, the judge doesn't have a stake in it. He doesn't give a crap. And the people that are representing your family are other attorneys that he sees all the time.
Well, in my mother's case, and I think this happens with everyone, people will say, "Well, John, how did your mother why was this forged trust such a vehicle?" And I think it worked like this. Forged trust, if mother had taken, because Dad, the majority of Dad's wealth was in his liquidity, meaning, Fidelity, Charles Schwab. He might have had $1 million in cash, but in his mind, cash isn't earning. Right. So he had stocks and bonds because that's earning and growing. So the whole reason why, and I think for her, it was like, oh my God, this was the game plan all along. And then he makes the turn and he doesn't know where he is. And suddenly I guarantee you my sisters knew about it, but family fraud is not publicized. So the whole reason why this trust was so important was she goes to Charles Schwab and she goes, hi, this is my husband's trust. You see, I'm the trustee. And they, look at it, they scan it and send it to their attorneys. Okay, yes, all right. We see you're the 100% trustee. Yes. And now I would like you to transfer $10 million to this account. So the forged trust was everything. If she didn't have that, then she goes in with his trust, and right away, his trust makes his bank the trustee. And also, if you were to read his trust says anytime she wants to make a major purchase, she has to go to the bank, and they can say no.
Right. And
I think for 15 years, for whatever reason, it just grated on her. Any other wife of 47 years would say, okay, I don't agree with it, but, till death do us part, I'm going to follow his wishes, because after all, he is giving me $15 million. Right? And for whatever reason, it had to have been like, I put up with his, blah, 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 and he only gives me half, $15 million.
Right.
And now, granted, for the last 10 years, she spent $250,000 a year. $2.5 million in 10 years. He gave her 6 times that, and it wasn't enough. And this is the subtlety. What I would hope, if there were a movie, if there were, someone listening, and they're like, oh, this would make a great news story. This happens everywhere. That's why I put the AARP article saying family fraud is so common in the foreword of the book. If this story gets out there, that would be the justice. Because look, I know I'm going to lose the lawsuit. Big, stolen money beats honest money. And, at most I'm going to pot shot, but if there was interest and if people show up in the gallery, look, I'm going to make a spectacle of myself. The first shirt is 3 lies. The new shirt has 7. The first baby has 3 lies. The new shirt has Pinocchio on it. And I think if people, look, I am mocking him, of course, but it's based in truth, right? And then, of course, can you imagine I wear this shirt and the judge says, you need to take it off. No, I'm not taking it off. Can you imagine, my rights under the First Amendment being...
It's a slippery slope for the judge. Yeah, you can't. Yeah, this is a protest.
Yeah, I have the right to do it. Hey, he can sue me, but look, I'm here because I wore a shirt. He said this. It's a lie.
Right.
No matter how you slice it. And look, it's not just one lie. It's 40 of them.
Right.
Yeah. Also, the bar has rules that says a lawyer shall not knowingly make a false statement. I complained to the bar and they said, oh, while you're going through the case, we can't intervene.
Mm-hmm.
If the bar doesn't enforce their own rules, I even complained to the chief judge. So I plan to call the chief judge as a witness in the defamation case.
They're going to love that.
I'm going to subpoena him to say, okay, all right, you have these standards, right? You have blah, blah, blah. And so you don't want an attorney to lie. Okay, so did you get my complaint? Is this the complaint? Is this your answer that says you're not even going to look into it?
Right.
What's the point of having standards? And the whole point is squeaky wheel gets the oil. If I make a big enough pain in the ass of myself, maybe, wouldn't it be crazy if Kenny Kemp, if some authority said, that's a goddamn lie, consequences. So I'm probably not going to win anything. I'm probably going to lose, but I just want to go the distance like Rocky.
Nice. All right. let's wrap it up there. Is that good?
The final thing I would say is you ought to do a plug for the free download.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you get a free. So let's hold up the book. So I've got.
How did they get it?
This camera? Okay.
Yeah.
This camera. So if you want a free download of the book, what you do is you go to the link below in the description box and you click on the link. It will bring you to familyfeud.net, familyfraud.net, which is the link. Just click on the link. And if you go on the site, my logo is on the site. You can click my logo and you go and fill out the information and you get a free download for the book, Family Feud.
Fraud.
Fuck off.
You know what's funny about
say it again? Family, you get a free download of Family Fraud.
Here, if it's any consolation. And by the way, look, I'm a total amateur. I designed the cover myself.
Yeah.
But I love Family Fraud. The fraud. There's actually a font that is spelled out in money.
Okay.
Yeah. So fraud is in $100 bills.
Yeah.
I don't know what the font is. Also, can you see the hangman? Can you read the words?
The hangman?
On my shirt.
Oh my God, bro. What are you two? I see the end is it screwed?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was not, I was wearing a blue shirt, but I just thought.
Did you put that on there? I was going to say,
not at the time, but when I was designing the cover, I thought it was really fitting. The missing letter is E.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, look, I want the average reader to think three things. Number one, there is no effing way this is true.
Right.
And my currency is truth. All the names, look, I name all my mother's dishonest attorneys. I name all her incompetent accountants. I name my sisters. At the end of the book, so number one, my currency is truth. Number two, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed, a penny fell out of the book. So there is a story in there that's the God's honest truth. It's called Dad's Pennies. I think it's on page 12 or 13. So after Dad died, this penny fell out of this section. The ebook, you'll be robbed of this. The paperback has the penny in it. But there's a story that all of us kids experience right after Dad died. We would find pennies in the oddest places. So my little story was, I was driving down to West Palm Beach for Storm Stopper, like a Storm Stopper delivery or something. And I got a flat tire. My right front tire went flat. I pull into a service station and I bring the guy out. And there, sitting on top of the tire, is a goddamn penny.
Right.
It made no sense. How'd the penny get there? And when I told it to my family, because I was then in contact with them, they said, oh, that's one of Dad's pennies. And it was, when we talk about Dad's pennies, we would find penny. Even now, when I see a penny, I'm like, oh, hey, Dad, nice to see you.
Right.
It was thought and suggested that, spiritual, Dad is showing his presence. So that's in the book. So look, I wrote it out of love, a little bit of anger, and I hope three things. Someone reads it and says, there's no way it's true. Number two, they laugh. There's a fair amount of humor. And number three, they learn something or some things. And they say, wow, he has a lot of great ideas on how to protect a family member that's vulnerable, that may be non-obvious.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate you making the drive. So if you like the video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this, share the video, leave a comment, and go to the description and get a free copy of the book, Family Fraud. And I appreciate you guys watching. See ya.